Thank you for being with us for day 2 of our Board of Regents meeting. Hope everyone had a wonderful evening last night, and once again want to thank President Engstrom and the folks here at the University of Montana for a wonderful day yesterday, a great meeting, and a good reception last night at Spectrum. That was outstanding. Thank you very much, Dr. Engstrom. In terms of today's agenda, we are going to go back just very briefly for 10 or 15 minutes this morning. We'd like to go back to the part of the agenda, the ARSA agenda, the Academic Research and Student Affairs agenda. There's a piece on there that, because of time constraints yesterday, that we were going to hold off until our next meeting, and we've opted not to do that. We'd like to pull up under information item E, which is the MSU Billings Academic Program Prioritization update. I'm not sure that this necessarily needs to be set up by anybody, but if we could have folks from the MSU Billings campus come up and present to us that presentation, we sure would love to have it at this point. Thank you very much. And we apologize for skipping over you yesterday. Thank you for being here this morning.
Well, thank you for starting the meeting with us. It's an honor. Thank you, Commissioner, Regents Chair, all my fellow colleagues. You heard me talk yesterday during our mission review about our 2009-2010 Northwest visit, at the time which we were commended for our service to our stakeholders, but asked to better match our resources with our priorities. So as we completed our strategic planning process over the next several years in conjunction with our core themes in the mission review, we charged ourselves as a campus with an academic program prioritization project. And back this time last year in Bozeman, we had a brief time to tell you about that project, which was just getting started. But now the project is more mature, so I'm going to invite my colleague up. I introduced her to you a year ago. This is Dean Diane Doohan. At that time, she was the Dean of the College of Allied Health Professions. She is still the Dean of the College of Allied Health Professions, but she's also the interim Graduate Studies Director on our campus. So she will tell you a little bit about the progress to date.
Thank you, Provost Pagano and fellow commissioners. Good morning, and thank you for inviting us to present on the MSU Billings Program Prioritization. As Dr. Pagano mentioned, I'm Diane Doohan. I'm Dean of the College of Allied Health Professions, but most importantly for this time, I want to talk to you as the chair of the Academic Program Prioritization Council at MSU Billings. MSU Billings began to consider academic prioritization more than 2 years ago. We did this because, as Dr. Pagano mentioned, we received recommendations from the Northwest Commission of Colleges and Universities. But we continued as a necessary response to our own strategic plan and the decision by the Montana Board of Regents to implement a performance-based funding model. We used 2 years to familiarize ourselves with what academic prioritization means and how best to go through the process at MSUB. We also, during this 2-year time, developed the MSUB strategic plan. Core theme 2 of our strategic plan, providing an environment of learning, calls us to identify programs which are in highest demand and have room for growth, and to develop a strategy to identify and manage phase-out programs as necessary and appropriate. Responsibility for the process was given to what became known as the Academic Prioritization Council, or APC, by Provost Pagano in August of 2013. The APC consisted of 8 members, 1 faculty representative from each college, the Director of Graduate Studies, who at the time was Dr. David Craig, the President of ASMSUB, and the Associate Vice Provost. This group developed the process, which included the review and adaptation of the model that we used. We also set the timeline and held each element in the process to that specific time frame. And we kept the faculty informed and involved through input on the criteria and through it becoming their responsibility to work with department chairs on completing the review of programs in each of their departments. During the process, the department chairs worked with their faculty to review the evidence which supported each of the items within the criteria. There were 8 major criteria, and each of them had sub-items. They then made recommendations for each of the programs. The decision was either to grow, maintain, be integrated, or be phased out. Following that decision point, the evidence went to the dean for each of the colleges. The dean then consulted with department chairs on the evidence, and the dean made the recommendation: grow, maintain, integrate, or phase out. The next step was the academic senate. The academic senate completed the same review, going over the same criteria and using the same data. This was done following the department chairs and deans' reviews and recommendations. Academic Senate made an independent recommendation that followed the 4 items: grow, maintain, integrate, or phase out. The APC decided early on in the process that the final word would come from the faculty, and that would be through the department chairs before it moved on to the provost and chancellor. Because of that decision, the APC reviewed each program, all comments, and all recommendations made by the faculty, the dean, and the department chairs in Academic Senate. We then asked the department chairs to go through the matrix one last time, answer specific questions that we had framed where we believed there was additional evidence or comments that were needed to clarify information. Following the department chair review, all of its elements, the document was handed over to Provost Pagano and Chancellor for final action. I do want to note that during this process, which as you recall from a minute ago, began in August of 2013 and ended in April of 2014, we kept them to a pretty tight timeline. We didn't let anybody fall behind. Dr. Groseth announced his retirement from MSUB. The APC considered very carefully what impact that would have on the process, as Dr. Groseth had supported the process and talked about the process often in the time we'd been in process. The APC subsequently recommended to Provost Pagano that he include Interim Chancellor Stearns in an advisory capacity as he finished his review in late April. The APC then went on to note that the ultimate responsibility should reside with the new chancellor who would come to MSUB in the summer. Therefore, it was the APC's recommendation that all elements prior to the new chancellor's input be considered part of the process and not final. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Doohan. You can see why we asked her to be the committee chair. A very thorough process. It was very transparent. And if anybody is interested in seeing the nitty-gritty of all the results, you just go to MSUB's webpage, put /APC, and it takes you right to the page, and all 160 programs are listed there. You can click on any program. You can read the comments of the faculty, the Senate, the dean, myself, what have you. So what I'd like to present just very briefly are the current recommendations. The current recommendations, this is up through the provost, are on the slide on the screen right now. You can see out of 160 programs that we reviewed, right now 90 of them are recommended to maintain as is, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. 36 are recommended to grow, 15 to integrate, and 19 to phase out. Now, what we did while we were waiting on a new chancellor is we charged a committee to look at the resource gains of these recommendations as they stand. And as you might expect, the resource gains aren't robust. We do get some efficiency of our catalog, we get some efficiency of some of our minors, but we don't gain a whole lot of FTE. However, in those 90 recommended to maintain, often, if you read my comments, I talk about let's look at this one more year as we're waiting to make these final, because if we make a decision to phase out a program, then we have to go through the board process, and that will take most of that doesn't sound right, but it would take most of the year to go through that board process to put programs on moratorium. So we do have time to evaluate the results as they now stand. We also have another year's worth of data. So that's the state of the process right now. I'm working very closely with Chancellor Nook. We talk about this often, and as we go through our annual budgeting process and through our strategic plan update for this year, we will very carefully review these and make recommendations back to the the faculty and Senate and this board soon. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the board? Any questions from the board?
I have one. I'm curious as to how the process relates to the system strategic plan, and also ask what role, if any, has the Commissioner's office played in the process?
Mr. Chair, Regent Johnstone. So interestingly enough, about 3 years ago, this was a pretty significant priority of the boards. We had some national experts come speak to this, and I think we've made a lot of headway. The system, in terms of your question, I don't think we're directing the process or we're designing the process, but we are very supportive of the process. We worked through the board to encourage more of this to happen around the system. I think as we start to answer the questions that we talked about some yesterday with the mission review, is what are we going to be in each area, and what will those missions be? I think they've got to review what has been done. And so that actually was the backdrop to what started the mission review conversation a few years ago. Regent Barrett and others, Regent Buchanan, very active in this. So I think the system is incredibly supportive of it. I do believe it's an academic process and needs to happen at a campus level and through the provost's office. You know, I don't think there's a board policy that we say we should have X amount of students per course, or we should have, you know, and that was talked about. But I think campuses need to really drill down and work through this process. Ultimately, I think it is sort of the key to some of the budget restrictions that we all face, and we need those campuses to be productive and work through that process.
Well, just an observation. It seems to me it's going to be a challenge to affect the overall strategic plan if the strategic plan doesn't become a part of each campus's analysis and review and program review. So,
Our strategic plan or the campuses?
no, the system strategic plan.
Yeah. And I think it is embedded in there. I mean, ultimately, that is the access and affordability drives at that, effectiveness and efficiency. I mean, when you look at our three main strategic goals, economic development, I think the program review is really driving to those three ends. And so from that level, and that's what I'm saying, I think the board has set guidance on this with that in mind, and I think from that level it's happening. But I do believe that once you get past that board direction to make this happen, it needs to be a campus process.
I was just going to mention, I wanted to make one clarification as well. This process is a little different than the program review process that the board asks us to do each year. That process looks at a program with respect mostly to that faculty and that dean and then up to the provost office. This was a little more in-depth, and it was university-wide by the faculty and academic senate across all programs, looking at our campus more holistically rather than one program at a time. We did this as a unit, and as we put our strategic plan together, I also wanted to mention to Regent Johnstone that we had 10 weeks of pre-reading material getting prepared for our strategic planning retreat, and one of the weeks we studied the Board of Regents strategic plan very thoroughly.
Further questions from the board? Regent Krause.
Thank you, Chairman. It is a brave and painful thing to do, I think, to go through this process. So congratulations and thank you. I know that you're refocusing and it is the path forward. So I just want to say thank you for tackling it and making it happen. I know it was tough, and in the middle of changes of the chancellor and everything else, to pull it off is exceptional. So thank you.
Thank you, Regent Krause.
Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Chair Test. I want to echo that as well, but what I also want to mention is that I think what's most important, because I was part of working with those board members as well when I first came on, Regent Buchanan and others were talking about program prioritization, how important it was, and that's when I became aware of that as well. What I think is most important here is that it wasn't a specific directive by the board, but that it's self-initiated. And I think that's what is so important in this process. The other thing that I heard in the report is that utilizing the faculty and giving them authority in this process as well, I think is essential in making this a success for your particular campus. So I applaud you in not only doing this, but how you did it as well. I think it is difficult. I'm sure it's very difficult to take a look at, programs that maybe you've had for many, many years, but does it work with where you are now? And I think it is a brave decision to make. So thank you for going through this effort, and we look forward to hearing how this evolves.
Thank you.
Regent Sheehy.
I want to follow up on Regent Johnstone's question for Commissioner Christian. Is there a way that we can take this work that's been done and apply the data to our own strategic plan? Is that something, we've asked the question, I'm just wondering, is there a way to make that happen? Is that something that we're doing in another area that Bill and I are unaware of?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Regent Sheehy, yes, I believe is the answer. And there was also work done led by Regent Buchanan on this student success agenda. And within that document, it's directly referenced in there. And, our strategic plan is 3 lines long. I think it covers what we need it to, but the success agenda is a much more guiding document, and it's squarely in that, and it's something that we're asking all our campuses to do. So I think the guidance is there from the board, and we can, at a later presentation, show more about what's happening on that end. But I think there's good guidance from the board on what needs to happen with regard to prioritization and asking the campuses to do that at a campus by campus level. Tyler, you worked considerably on that document. Do you have anything to add?
Mr. Commissioner, members of the board, no, you hit the nail right on the head. We specifically lined out in that document 10 very operational augmentations to our high-level plan, and program alignment, including contraction of programs, is specifically stated, and that's an addendum to our strategic plan. As far as where does it appear in the data, the program prioritization is going to affect a number of different indicators. Are they going to be at the campus level, the type that the campus would measure, which maybe is student to faculty ratio, full-time to part-time ratios? Those will probably be more of a campus level indicators. But as we look at higher level metrics, such as those found in our operating budget, when we look at the percent of funds spent on instruction, and a number of other higher level, and they're not coming to me immediately, but the program mix, the number of degrees produced, the amount of funds that you spent to do it, are going to come out in a variety of different ways.
Further questions? Further questions from the board? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Since we are still with the ARSA agenda, it's my understanding, Regent Robinson, that you have a note for the board with regard to something we discussed yesterday. Is that correct?
Yes, it actually applies to a discussion that happened in the Staff and Compensation Committee, but I think it still applies. If I could, there was discussion yesterday that we had about faculty salaries and trying to get an idea of some of the deficiencies or the lower salaries that we have right now, and how we can grow those salaries in that discussion. At one point we talked about, and I had mentioned our overall budget, which is over $1 billion, and incorrectly, I just wanted to state for the record that I was really referring to the current unrestricted fund, which then the faculty salaries are a part of. I estimated about 70%. It's actually 76% of that current unrestricted fund, and that unrestricted fund is closer to $476 million rather than over $1 billion. So I just wanted to make sure that we were talking about something that was accurate when we consider this. That would make the faculty salaries about $360 million of that unrestricted fund. So I just wanted to add that for the record, if I could.
Thank you, Regent Robinson,
Thank you,
for that
Chief Justice.
clarification. Without further ado, let us now proceed to the Budget Committee portion of our meeting today. And for this, I will turn it over to Regent Albrecht.
Thank you, Chair Tess. As we look at the administrative budget and audit items, I would like to ask our committee if there are any items on the consent agenda that you would like to remove. Okay, seeing none, we will move on. We will go ahead and put those forward to for approval later this morning. Moving on to action, I would like to invite Vice President Terry Least up so we can learn a little bit more about the authorization to execute lease for the WWAMI program.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Terry Least. I'm the Vice President for Administration and Finance at Montana State University. Today, MSU is seeking your authorization to execute a lease with Bozeman Deaconess Hospital for our growing WWAMI program. As you know, Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana, and Idaho have a medical school partnership where students take their first year of medical school in their home state and then complete their medical education at the University of Washington and at clinical sites around the 5-state region. The Montana legislature approved an additional 10 slots in the 2013 session, allowing 30 Montana students to join the WWAMI program each year. Additionally, as we discussed at the September board meeting, the WWAMI program is adopting a new curriculum beginning next summer where students will spend the first 18 months on the campus at each state. This change was made to allow our students a better chance of graduating from medical school on schedule. And it has the obvious residual effect of allowing our students to spend longer time in Montana for their education. With the increase in cohort size from 20 to 30, as well as having the new curriculum of 18 months in Bozeman, MSU will need more space to accommodate the WWAMI program beginning in the fall of 2016. As most other WWAMI campuses in other states have already done, MSU would like to partner with our local hospital to house the WWAMI program. Bozeman Deaconess Hospital has recently begun construction of a new addition and has offered to lease some of that space to MSU. We anticipate that this lease will be for approximately 12,000 square feet at a rate of about $16 per square foot, including utilities and maintenance. With an initial term of 4 to 5 years, with options to renew several more similar length terms. The estimated annual cost is below the current market rates in Bozeman, based on my internet check of some of the websites last week for this type of space and office space in general. In addition, having it located at the hospital will provide numerous benefits for the WWAMI program. Among those, our ability to actively involve practicing clinicians, as well as our third-year WWAMI students who will be back, or some of which will be back in Bozeman for their clinical rotations. In addition to the lease costs, MSU expects to reimburse Bozeman Deaconess Hospital for initial customization of the leased space. These costs will be paid for with current WWAMI reserves, as well as gifts fundraising for the program. If needed, any remaining space customization costs would be repaid to Bozeman Deaconess over the lease term. As for the lease itself, the WWAMI budget can fully accommodate these costs with revenues that would be coming from students staying in Bozeman for the additional half a year. I'd like to thank you at this time for the opportunity to present this. I have Dr. Martin Teinze here today with us. He's the director of the WWAMI medical program, and either one of us would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lees. Questions from the board? From the committee? No? Okay. Questions from the board? I would like to know what alternatives you explored.
Madam Chair and members of the committee and members of the board, we have certainly looked at other locations, certainly on campus, first of all, is the first place that we would look, and we just don't have space that would accommodate that. We also looked at other spaces that are close to campus that we could lease. The rates, quite honestly, were either similar or higher, and the benefits of having this location at the hospital are really great for our students and for the program as a whole. And if I might defer to Dr. Teinsey to see if he has some additional comments regarding that question, that would be good.
Yeah, the new WWAMI curriculum that will start next summer is a more clinically focused curriculum than what we currently have. So instead of having individual courses in subjects like biochemistry or cell physiology, the entire curriculum is going to become based on case studies and diseases, and we will be using a lot of physicians to actually educate our students, much more so than in the current curriculum. And it is much more efficient to be doing that where the physicians already are, because each of them will be only a part-time WWAMI appointment and clinical time the rest of the time. We're also hoping to integrate the first, second, and third year students into helping to teach each other. And this is going on at all the other WWAMI sites as well, and has been possible in the past only in Seattle, where students were there for the whole 4 years. And having WWAMI located at the hospital has major advantages compared to other spaces. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Regent Johnstone.
Not a question, a comment. The WWAMI program is just a terrific program. And I can remember my father was involved 40-some years ago with it when he was with Montana State University. But in lieu of the cost of a medical school, this is so much more efficient and effective. And it sounds to me like the expansion of the program makes all the sense in the world, and putting it at the hospital is equally sensible. So I'm very much supportive of it.
Thank you, Regent Johnstone.
Regent Krause.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the things that I particularly like is that we're leasing, not buying, right? We're not building, we're not buying, we're leasing. We're avoiding the capital costs, we're partnering. Those are the kind of solutions that the university system as a whole needs to look at. So thank you for taking a lead on that.
Yeah. Madam Chair and Regent Krause, thank you very much. We did take a very serious look at the financials for both of those situations, and this is the best alternative. Thank you.
Regent Robinson.
Chair Albrecht, thank you. I have two questions. One is the entire program then will be located in one spot with this move. Is that correct, or will there still be some logistics between oversight and actual operation?
Yes, thank you for letting me go into more detail on that. Our plan is to move everything that we now have on the MSU campus to the Bozeman-Deaconess campus. That means for some of us, there will be some frequent back and forth, but for the students, it allows them to stay put, and it's much easier for one or two faculty members to be making the trip back and forth than 30 or even 60 students. So it was decided that it was best to keep all the operations together.
And thank you. And in the long run, then, I mean, this obviously will be for a period of time to see how that works, but obviously you'll be looking at how the logistics work, having to manage that from afar too, right? And have you thought of a permanent home, the thoughts of a permanent home and how that might happen?
Yes, we have thought about that. There is further room for expansion at Bozeman Deaconess Hospital in their new addition. They're putting in a 5-story addition, which still has a considerable amount of unassigned space. So there is the room to grow there in the future. There is also a growing clinical component to the WWAMI program in Bozeman. We now have 6 different clinical clerkships in Bozeman, whereas 5 years ago we had only 1. That effort will continue to grow, and we already have a WWAMI clinical office at Bozeman Deaconess Hospital that will be combined in the same space. And so I think in the long run, that location will be advantageous as the program grows.
Thank you.
Chair Tuss.
Hopefully I didn't miss this. What are you currently doing, or what will you be doing with the space that you're vacating on campus where it's currently located?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, that is not in my purview to reassign that space, but we have told the campus we are giving up all the space we currently occupy, classrooms, labs, offices, the whole works, and it is up to them to reassign it.
Madam Chair, Chair Tuss, as chair of our Space Management Committee on campus, I can assure you that we have a long list of in the waiting queue for various types of space, and this space will be allocated through that process, an open and collaborative process on our campus where we would reassign that space with final recommendation going to President Cruzado.
Any other questions? Any further questions? I would just like to comment that this is exciting, as we know that the demand for this program is great, and it also meets our continued efforts to ensure that our rural communities are served through the WWAMI program. And so thank you for your efforts, and we look forward to hearing more about it in the future.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, I'd like to move on to our next item, which is authorization for construction of the Washington Grizzly Champion Center. And for this, I would like to invite Vice President Mike Reed to the podium, as well as our Athletic Director, Kent Haslam.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for letting me come and present this item to you this morning. The University of Montana is requesting authorization to construct a 46,000 square foot Grizzly Champion Center for a total cost of up to $14 million. This center will be used by all student athletes and includes a new football locker room, athlete weight room. It improves the southwest corner of the stadium and includes concessions and restrooms. It adds offices for our strength and conditioning staff and provides additional meeting space. Related to the construction, the university is also requesting authorization to lease the construction site to the Foundation as authorized in section 2025-309 of the Montana Code. And lastly, the university is requesting approval to name the facility the Washington Grizzly Champion Center. Funding for the project may require partial financing. The financing would not exceed $5 million. We currently have $9 million already generated and on hand. And the debt service will be paid from athletic generated revenues. In total, the $14 million project will be paid through private donations and athletic generated revenues. No state revenues would be used for the facility. We also have a couple renditions available that I'd like to show you just to give an idea of the project in attachment 2. This would be the weight room, again, a rendition of what the weight room facility would look like. Then the locker room, and then a rendition from the outside. This maybe give you a little perspective of where the project is going. This would be on the southwest end of the stadium, basically between the Adams Center and the south entrance to the stadium. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I have Athletic Director Kent Haslam with me as well if there are any questions.
Certainly. And President Ingstrom, did you want to make some comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair Albrecht and members of the board. I would just like to add just some brief comments here. As you know, we enjoy tremendous visible facilities. Washington Grizzly Stadium is a real gem of Division I, and in fact, we as a university now enjoy the highest average attendance of any Division I FCS program in the country in Washington Grizzly Stadium. You saw the other night, those of you who were able to take a look, though, that the behind-the-scenes facilities are really substandard. And so due to the careful planning of Kent Haslam and other folks in facilities, we've designed this project, and now I want to publicly acknowledge the extremely generous donation of Kyle and Kevin Washington on behalf of the Washington Foundation. Their gift of $7 million really is the stimulus that allows us to go forward and complete this project. You have, as Vice President Reed said, a financial plan that has a maximum of $5 million of financing associated with it. However, since that plan was even written, as Mike just indicated, we've collected another $500,000 of private donations already. So it is our intent to collect as many private donations toward that $5 million piece as we can. But what you have is the proposal that would be the absolute maximum of financing that we would have to incur here. So I just wanted to say thanks publicly to the Washingtons and clarify that financial plan a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, President Ingstrom. Comments from our committee. Regent Johnstone.
Yes, I'm supportive of the proposal. Just one question. To the extent that you have to borrow, are you satisfied that you have, that there's borrowing available either through the intercap or elsewhere?
Yeah, we, for a debt not to exceed $5 million, again, we're not going to even need to go out to borrow probably for towards the end of 2015, 2016. So we still have a fair amount of time to be able to do fundraising. Presently, we could cover the debt off of the athletic revenues. We've had some of the lighting is being paid off. And so the revenues that have been committed to other projects have paid off those projects, and those revenues are now available. If we were to go right now and borrow the full $5 million, we'd be looking at a debt service ratio of approximately 1.63. So we have a fair amount of margin there.
Thank you.
Regent Krause.
Oh, thank you. Could you explain to me, you said something about reliance on a particular statute and leasing that to the foundation. Could you explain to me the significance of that?
Sure, Madam Chair, Regent Krause. The statute I was referring to is section 2025-309. That's a statute that's specifically written to allow athletic facilities to be constructed and fundraised under the direction of a foundation. And so what you do is you lease the property to the foundation, and the foundation has control of the revenue and the funds to be able to do the construction of the project, at which point they turn that back to the university and gift it basically back to the university after the project's completed.
So to be clear, the foundation controls puts out the bids, controls the construction, not the people in Helena, like a normal academic building. Is that the significance?
Well, the university actually in the agreement, the lease agreement that should be attached also as one of the items, actually shows that the foundation, although they are the apparent owners of the project, they then contract with the university under the regulations and so forth to carry forward. So the university is very much in control of the project in accordance with the agreement. But by shifting the property over to the foundation, it allows us to do other bidding practices that ensure that we're not just doing a low bid project, but we're able to still maintain the highest level of construction within the confines of the revenues.
Thanks.
Commissioner Christian.
Madam Chair, Regent Krause, that's exactly right. And unlike the academic buildings, which is partly managed through A&E and that's the piece that sort of gets changed with the leasing provision. First time it was created into statute and used was actually the creation of Washington Grizzly Stadium itself. but it's been used on almost every athletic facility since, including small renovations to large ones. The south end zone in Bozeman, we use the same provision. And so we have had pretty good luck with this. It does sort of change the process, but the main party sort of diluted in it is A&E, not the campus themselves. The campus will remain in control of the project and be very active in that, as they are with other projects on campus.
Follow up?
Yeah, I did have a follow-up question. It's probably for the commissioner. So do we get concerned that we're having, are there quality issues because there isn't this level of oversight, or are there any quality issues we should be concerned about, or coherence with the rest of the state building program or anything like that?
Madam Chair, Regent Krause, I truly do not believe there's any concerns there. It will go through a almost identical process, just one managed by us, but will be designed by professional architect firms the process is very similar, and as it will be managed much like all other projects on campus, and it'll be very consistent with the architecture and design on campus.
Okay, and just one last follow-up, and is this statute, does this address only athletic facilities, football stadiums? How narrowly defined is it again?
Madam Chair, Regent Krause, athletic facilities.
Okay,
we can get a copy, but yes.
Thank you, Regent Krause. Regent Sheehy.
May we look at the rendition again? The last one we saw with the sketch of the building. That one. Can you tell me where the M is in that picture, off that picture?
So the M on the hill would be to the far right.
Yeah. Oh, wait, over here?
No, it'd be over here on this side. So
Commissioner's throwing me off there.
if you can see the kind of rounded building in the background, that's the Adams Center.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Oh, okay. You had me all the way turned around. So in that rendition, which parts exist now and which parts are new?
None of that facility exists presently.
So that's the entire...
Well, the stadium where you see people seated, there's the football stadium, and then the oval part again, that's the Adams Center. But the actual part here, you almost look at three different buildings, the glass building and then the two slanted roofs. Those are all
Those
the
are all
facility.
new?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That looks like 14 million to me.
And
I apologize, Madam Chair. I would say that this is, again, just a rendition. It could certainly change from this, so this is the artist rendition presently.
But the M will still be to the right?
Yes, ma'am.
M will remain. Chair Tuss.
So just to clarify, the maximum amount that you're going to be potentially getting from a loan would be $5 million. So regardless of what that amount is, no student athlete fees will increase from this, correct? So could you just clarify for us one more time where regardless of how much, if it's 4 million, if it's 3 million, where is the money coming from to satisfy that if it's not going to come from increased student athletic fees?
Madam Chair, Regent Tuss, correct. The maximum amount that we would be borrowing, if we had to borrow money today, would be $5 million. We fully anticipate to see that diminish from that point. The revenues that would be paying the debt service, whichever amount that would be, are coming mainly from box sales and ticket revenues for athletics currently. Those revenues historically have been pledged towards paying for those boxes, paying for the stadium seats, paying for lighting. Those projects have been fully funded and paid for now, and those revenues would be available then to go towards this project. So we would not be increasing athletic fees or charges to fund this project. We can fund it off of our current financial structure.
Okay. President Engstrom?
Madam Chair, Regent Tuss, this is exactly the mechanism that we used to finance the East Side expansion that was paid for through revenue, the same revenue. That East Side expansion has been paid off actually ahead of schedule, and so that same mechanism would be used to serve the debt on this project.
Regent Robinson.
Madam Chair, In follow-up to what Regent Tuss was talking about, the operation and maintenance costs, could you talk a little bit about where the revenue will come for that? Because obviously that'll be a long-term commitment as well.
Sure. It's, Madam Chair and Regent Robinson, the estimated O&M costs for the project are approximately $210,000 annually. And those costs would be paid again through the same revenue stream. We would not be using or seeking any state funds to cover the project. It'll all be funded from the existing revenue structure.
So are you projecting that sales will increase in any way to make sure that you have enough as you continue to grow this facility? Or are you saying the revenues that you have on hand will cover that?
Regent Robinson, yes. Currently, the revenues that we are generating presently with our ticket sales, the box sales where we're at currently, we would have a debt coverage ratio of 1.6, which is significant, and that's on a $5 million loan. Again, anything that we get less than that even frees up more revenue. So under our current structure, without anything changing, we have plenty of capacity to handle this project.
Good, thank you. And I also want to thank Mr. Haslam for walking us through the facility the other evening, those of us that could be in attendance, to actually get a firsthand perspective of what exists in the facility. I thought it was really helpful for us. It's nice to look at the pretty pictures and everything and to anticipate the excitement, but to see what actually is there was helpful to us, I think, to realize that this is an older facility that certainly has the guts are okay, the structure is, but to build upon it, it sounds like it's time to do that. So thank you for taking that time. Also wanted to, I think in all of this, it's kind of lost, and it shouldn't be lost, and President Engstrom, I'm glad that you mentioned it, as far as the generous donation from the Washington Foundation to really give this life to move forward, I think is wonderful and very, very generous. The third part of this is that obviously we're not only one of the larger employees as far as our system, but we certainly provide some great projects and great jobs for Montanans out there too. So I think this is going to be a great job creator for a period of time here. So I'm definitely in support of this project.
Thank you. Regent Johnstone.
In line with what Regent Robinson and President Engstrom said, I would hope that when we pass the resolutions, we would incorporate into the resolutions a formal expression of thanks and appreciation to the Washington Foundation.
Thank you. And I would just comment that that kind of a investment from the Washington Foundation and the Washington family really does help to spur on other folks to invest. And with the timeline, it certainly seems that it's highly likely that the funds for, within that $5 million should be able to be raised so that we will take on very little financing. I'm curious if when we had the tour, if there was anything strategically placed to create the smell throughout the locker room. And if you have any plans to eliminate some of that scent in the new facility.
Madam Chair, I don't have answers to that, but I do have Athletic Director Ken Haslam here. I'm sure could respond to that one.
Was that intended to sway us? You know, but I would like to comment that, Kent, and I really appreciated your explanation. You know, when you look at, you never want to be short-sighted as we look into the future. And if you would just real briefly talk about the master planning that you went through, because certainly some of this can be done piecemeal when we are looking at financial constraints and what we can handle. And I was really pleased. I think folks need to hear a little bit about how this master planning and the phases were developed, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did not install the stink. It's there on its own. This project really had its genesis back a year plus when we approached some donors to help us when we had an idea. And their approach was, Kent, you need to get a master plan, and you need to take a look at things from a large scale and see where you're going to go, so you don't build something that you're going to have to tear down because you're going to want to add more seats to the stadium. So here's a gift, and let's get a master planner on place. And so it was a great experience for me to sit back and have this firm say, okay, let's look at the biggest this stadium can get, and then let's piece this down, and what space do you have available? You got a big mountain on one side, you got a river on the other side, you got a campus on the other side, you've only got so much space. And so it was a good exercise for me to start to whittle this down to what's our greatest need, being this facility. And one other thing I'd comment, which was really pleasing to me and something that I think gets lost in this is a direct investment in students. This is not some grandiose new office for the athletic director with Italian leather and great flat screen TVs. I mean, this is an investment directly into students. These are students first and student athletes, there's no doubt, but these are facilities that will be used by student athletes. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. And we certainly, we had students there and we're well aware that the constraints for the students in the existing space. Yes, Regent Kraus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I did want to follow up on that a little bit because we were talking also about the new student academic facility that's going up to Study Center. But I think, you know, this is ostensibly for football, but could you talk a little bit how it's going to benefit, say, women's sports or the other sports, not just the football?
Thank you, Regent Kraus. Madam Chair, yes, it is going to be primarily a new football locker room, and well, 7,000 or so square feet of it will be that, but the rest of the facility will be used by the 320 plus student athletes, male and female. There's meeting rooms that will be utilized by all student athletes. There are some helps with our fan amenities as well, but nowadays every student athlete is in a weight room. The softball players lift, the soccer players lift, the tennis players lift. They all do this, and this is all part of their routine. And so having a facility that will benefit all of the student athlete population at the University of Montana was certainly critical.
Could you remind me one time what the graduation rate is for your student athletes? Do you know what that is?
Regent Kraus, Madam Chair, I could tell you it's higher than the student body population, and it's 67, 68%, I believe, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
It's higher than that.
Any other, if there's no, oh, yes, Regent Sheehy.
I'm wondering, as you do your master planning, and I understand this is just a rendition and that it's not a guarantee, I'm wondering how you make sure that this building, this facility fits in with the architectural integrity of the university, and that it's, we all who went to school here want the campus not to remain the same, but we want the architecture to endure over time. Is this something that's of a concern to you as you do your master plan, and is your architect on board with that? And what's the university's role in ensuring that this fits in other than just for the constraints of the space?
Madam Chair, Regent Sheehy, yes, the master plan, although the athletic department did their own master plan for the athletic facility, the construction standards and the oversight for the construction is actually handled by the university physical plant personnel. So it would adhere to the university's construction standards and master plan.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I would like to move on to Item C, which is authorization to build out shelled space of the Interdisciplinary Science Building.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As stated, the university is requesting authorization to build out approximately 4,220 square feet of currently shelled space in the Interdisciplinary Science Building. The build out of space is necessary to accommodate the research activities associated with the recent $45 million U.S. Army Corps Engineering Cooperative Agreement. This construction will provide approximately 3,800 square feet of office and research space on the 4th floor of the building, and an additional 420 square feet of data server room in the basement. The total project costs are estimated at about $900,000. They will be entirely funded with authorized F&A revenue from the agreement. Again, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Regent Williams.
Is that the final build out of shelled space, or is there more shelled space on top of that inside that building?
Madam Chair, Regent Williams, there still is approximately one more floor remaining in that facility to be built out.
Any other questions? Again, this is an exciting opportunity given that significant grant secured. So we're excited to see the progress there. If there's no further questions with this particular item, I'd like to move on to item D.
Okay.
Authorization to proceed with issuance of Series N 2015 refunding revenue bonds.
Madam Chair, thank you. The item again, the university is requesting authorization to refinance basically or issue a Series N 2015 refunding revenue bond. This will be a new series of bonds that effectively refinance the Series J 2005 facilities improvements and refunding revenue bonds at a much more desirable rate. This should result in, on the conservative end, a $1 million savings over the life of the debt. The Series N bonds will be issued as fixed rate, tax exempt debt, and only if the net present value savings are greater than 5% or greater. Be happy to address any questions if I could.
Regent Johnstone.
Yes, Chair. Albrecht, your name and Tyler's name, I'm struggling.
I'll answer.
I will recuse myself from any participation in the discussion or the vote on this issue. D.A. Davidson, of which I'm an employee, is the placement agent, and therefore I believe I have a conflict of interest.
Thank you. Yes, Regent Kraus.
I'll pass.
Okay. And again, just to clarify, the threshold of making this decision, I believe you said is 5%?
Correct. When we go out, we anticipate to have a savings rate, a net present value savings greater than 5%. And if it's not greater than 5%, we wouldn't issue the bonds.
Thank you. Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Chair Albrecht. Is there a regular process that you go through to review these? And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how often that comes up. Is it annual or more often?
Sure. Madam Chair, Regent Robinson, the university tracks and manages its financing and its debt. It looks at it at least annually, and a lot of it just depends on what's happening with the markets, what we're seeing out there. We certainly know what our current debt is at. These bonds were coming up for maturity in May of 2015. And so it was an opportune time to look at them and decide whether or not refinancing was an opportunity as well. We also stay in contact with our bond counsel, Chapman Associates, and then also D.A. Davidson. We utilize them frequently also as far as helping us in looking at our finances.
Well, thank you for filling us in about that and for taking that effort. I know that a few meetings ago, Montana State University went through the same type of evaluation and came up with some savings as well. So I think it's great work, and I definitely support this effort. So thank you.
Thank you.
Regent Kraus.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll try to fill in a little bit for, having just sold some bonds. Are we a good bet then, the university system? And do we have are we insured? Is there a bond rating? Are we a good bet for investors?
Madam Chair, Regent Kraus, I would say yes, we're a good bet. And we're actually currently going through our rating right now. We've just finished up with Moody's, and we have a call with Standard & Poor's here in the next couple of weeks, and so we'll be seeing what our new ratings come in at, but I don't think we'll see much change there.
One of the things I'd be interested in is reading those reports, to see if they're, what the rating is, and if they find any constraints or any concerns about, our financial position that would affect our rating.
We certainly share, as soon as we find out what the final decision is on the two agencies, we can certainly share what we have with you.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments from the board? With that, I would like to get some acknowledgement that we are comfortable moving these action items forward for approval.
So moved.
Okay. We're not going to.
You don't need a motion
We don't need the
to move them
approval.
forward?
I would just like some agreement that we'd like to move these forward for approval.
Then I'll give you a thumbs up.
Okay, with recusal, of course, on the one item from Regent Johnstone. Okay, I would like to move on. Thank you, Mike. I would like to move on to information, and for that, I would like to ask Commissioner Christian to give us some updates. Commissioner Christian.
Madam Chair, thank you. Trying to figure out where we're at.
Revision of Board of
I got
Regents
it.
Policy 901.9.
So this is an information item, as they all are, but we want to bring to your attention that we are considering at a system-wide level, MUS level, the possible creation of an MUS foundation. There are a few instances where we believe donors have an interest in a system-wide gift to be applied to all of our campuses, and so we envision that this entity would pretty much work as a pass-through entity. There has been occasions in the past that we've needed such a vehicle, and I think that there's been creative ways we've handled some of those. I don't want to say that there is no other option, because there probably are, but I really do believe that this is the most transparent and upfront way to do what it is we're trying to do, and that is accept on rare occasion, but nonetheless some occasions for a system-wide gift. I think the reason that this hasn't been brought up before is that certainly, as we discussed at last meeting with some of the affiliate campuses creating foundations, there's always sort of that potential for conflict. And whether it exists or not, there's certainly the perception that there could be conflicts. Are we all sort of competing against each other for the same dollars? I think we can put steps in place that we really can manage that at a system level. This isn't a foundation that we envision business development officers out necessarily beating the pavement trying to find system-wide donations, but I think that it would be very useful to us, and I think there are occasions when there are gifts. We're not prepared to talk too much of the details now, but one perfect example, the governor is currently working with a private funder to possibly bring some money to Montana higher education, and that is, clearly they want it to be a system-wide gift, and clearly the governor doesn't want to be in a position where he's choosing which institution it should go to. And so I think there's those type of occasions, and I think if we're careful to manage those, we can do a good job, and in the end, no one's harmed, and the benefactors are the students of Montana. And so we will likely come back in January or March with a proposal to this extent, but wanted to give you all a heads up, and honestly wanted to give the campuses and their foundations a heads up, so no one feels like this is flying in under the radar. I think, if anything, we want to make sure this is as transparent as we can be within the system and as transparent as we can be moving forward. There is a good cause for it, and I think we can do a good job managing it.
And it sounds like you have already vetted some of this through the foundations to a certain extent.
Madam Chair, I have vetted this with the presidents and they with foundations to some extent. But we'll need to do more of that as before we bring this back. And, I understand that sort of perception, but I really think this is about gifts that we're otherwise not going to get. And I really think ultimately those foundations and those institutions end up being the benefactors of these awards. And so really it's going to end up where it's going to end up anyway. It's just an easier means for possible donors to do that. And we have done some in the past. There are some, we're a state agency, so there are some means that you can give money to the state of Montana and it still have the same tax protections that a 501c3 has. But I will tell you that people are much more comfortable with the latter and not going through the process of legal counsel trying to explain that this is going to work. And so I think it's been happening. I just don't think it's been quite as clear. And so I really do believe this clarifies it and that we can manage the potential conflicts.
Thank you. Chair Tuss?
Thank you, Chair Albrecht. Question, Commissioner. I'm assuming that at the very top of attachment number 1, which is before us, from the Policy and Procedures Manual, today's date is on there just for demonstration purposes only. Obviously, we're not taking action on this, and so is that why that's there?
Sure. Madam Chair, Regent Tuss, we're not taking action on it today. Whenever we bring it back, we will. We had considered bringing forth an item to take action, which is probably a more likely explanation of why it's there. But I really want to make sure the foundations from all the campuses have a chance to weigh in and ultimately hope that they're supportive of this effort. I think they and the system will benefit from it. But I want it to be an open process so no one feels threatened by it. And so we want to build some time in. And if we can bring it back in January, we've got a couple gifts that I think would fit nicely. But there again, if we don't feel like we're ready after having vetted it throughout the system, we'll bring it back when the time is right. We're not taking action today.
Okay. Thank you. Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I have a couple questions about the organization of this too, and I know that it's in its infancy to discuss, but as far as the governance of it, first of all, are you talking about a separate 501c3? And the board, the governing board, then would be a separate governing board from the Board of Regents or the same?
Madam Chair, Regent Robinson, I think almost by definition it has to be separate. So it is a separate entity. It would have a separate governance structure. We are in the infancy of that. Viv Hamill is looking at those. Obviously, there's some conflicts to resolve throughout, but I sort of anticipate maybe the most benign way to do this is a commissioner, a regent, and maybe the 2 flagship presidents serve as a governance body just so any potential conflicts that are out there can be managed right up front. So we'll see, but we got to work through that structure. That'd be part of the proposal we bring back for the approval process.
I appreciate that because I think that's key in this, and how it operates is sometimes you would have, a 2 completely separate governing boards, but they have some type of agreement between the 2 of them that ensures how it's going to operate. And very important, I would like for folks to consider is how the funds are going to be dispersed and the policy around that, because certainly it sounds like there's an opportunity to receive funds that normally we couldn't, but it's also important to know where those funds are going and how they're going to be utilized and how they're going to be appropriated. So I would like that to be a part of the discussion before it comes back.
Madam Chair, Regent Robinson, you're absolutely right on both accounts. I mean, the structure, it may be through some sort of inter-agreements. We'll look at that and know before we bring it back. As for the second part of your comments on the funds, we really anticipate this passing through dollars. So the campuses will continue to administer like the funds that I spoke of earlier, and there are a couple options out there right now, but the campuses would be empowered to decide which students get those funds. They would administer any of the scholarship awards. We would simply pass the dollars from the donor to the campus. And so there won't be a scholarship sort of, we anticipate no employees, I mean, this is simply passing funds through to those campuses, or in some cases, those foundations from the other campuses, so they can distribute the funds and the scholarship awards.
Great, thank you, and thank you for keeping that in mind. I think this is a good idea to explore. I think the details need to be worked out, and look forward to that.
Regent Kraus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, creating those 501c3s and those separate corporations are tricky. And just like Regent Johnstone, laudably, I'll say, recused himself in the last thing, although, you could see he's pretty far away from it, but just the perception for him to step away because of perceived conflict. There are inherent perceived conflicts between a separate independent 501c3 and a board of regents or a commissioner of higher education. And when you step on the board of the 501c3, you become dedicated to that corporation and not to the other one. And you find yourself walking all kinds of fine lines there. So that's one thing, what you described. And I'd like to talk to you about it some more, because we only have a limited amount of time. But there are a number of things that would worry me, either about the way you talked about setting it up or in general. And then I think the second thing that I would advise, and that's one of them, the conflict of interest. Are you serving this side or that side? Which side are you serving? And no matter how much you say, boy, they're both the same. They're not both the same, or they couldn't have an agreement and they couldn't be separate organizations. So it's a difficult thing. And then I guess the second thing would be, piece of advice would be to very narrowly define the purpose of the funds and what it is that you're taking them for, so that to reduce that all that noise about what they're for and who they go to and how just to take as many conflicts off the table as you can. And so that would be my two pieces of advice. Having to walk so many lines myself, I'd like to talk to you about it and have some more input on it before we get there, and maybe it would be worthwhile. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Madam Chair, Regent Kraus absolutely can do that. The other thing I forgot to mention that kind of goes to that is there is precedence around the country. Other systems do this. And so I think we can look at how those operate and gain a lot of knowledge there too. That will be worked through in good counsel advice. We'll look at other states and precedents before we come back to the board and see what is the appropriate means, if there is one. But clearly not prepared to go there today, but I just want everybody in their foundations to know that this discussion's on the table so we don't catch anybody by surprise. A lot of work to be done, though.
If there are no further comments or questions, I would just add, I think this is a great opportunity and good foresight for opportunities that hopefully will be coming down the pipeline. I'd like to move on to item B and invite Michael Allen, Montana Tech Facilities Director, to talk about energy conservation projects, chemistry, biology building, and engineering laboratory classroom building at Montana Tech.
Madam Chair, members of the board, this project actually began 2 years ago when State Architectural and Engineering Services hired a Montana firm to do a retro commissioning study on these two buildings, engineering laboratory classroom building and a chemistry biology building. These are the two main laboratory buildings on the Tech campus, and they are the biggest energy users in our facilities portfolio. Chemistry building was originally built in 1921. ELC was built in 1984. They've had some renovation to them, but in some cases they are original systems. We have done some preliminary analysis that we can do a self-funded facilities upgrade on HVAC control systems and components, and address deferred maintenance and reduce operations and maintenance costs on these two facilities through an energy performance contract program. We have worked with DEQ and selected a firm from their pre-qualified list, McKinstry of Missoula, and we are in the process of looking at how the financing will work and how much of the actual facilities work that we can put into a self-funded project. We are confident that we will be able to negotiate a contract similar to successful ones that were done both in Bozeman and in Missoula, and we look forward to working with State A&E and DEQ in the review of our analysis. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Regent Krause?
Thank you. Yes, I have a question. I don't want to make it hard for one of Montana's STEM education universities, but did you work with anybody else other than McKinstry? Tell me about the relationship with McKinstry just for a minute, briefly.
Regent Krause, members of the board, I personally have worked with several of the other firms, but not at Montana Tech, that are on the pre-qualified list. I am familiar with their the way they negotiate their contracts. McKinstry has shown the most interest in tech, and I believe they have showed the best understanding of higher education facilities. And again, successful completion at Missoula. So our contract would be based on that contract, and we believe it will be very successful.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Michael, Allen, and Chancellor Blackadder. We're excited to learn more about this as you proceed into the future. And at this point, I would like to turn it back over to Commissioner Christian so we can have a short discussion regarding the governor's budget.
Madam Chair, and that probably is the appropriate thing. The budget's a book, and our piece of it resembles that as well. So we probably doesn't serve anyone to get too far into it, but as you know, the governor was here yesterday and announced sort of his investments in higher education. I think they're substantial. We appreciate his support of higher education, and I just wanted to sort of briefly hit on what that means in terms of what I believe has been board priorities over the last few years and what was communicated to the budget office and the governor over the course of the last year as they build the budget. Of course, there's the cap agreement that we did in years past. That was a document that I signed with the governor, working toward ultimately a tuition freeze. Although maybe it has a new name this time, it will be a similar concept where we're basically asking the state of Montana to fund possible tuition increases. It does have the effect of freezing tuition. It does not have the effect of freezing expenditures, and that, I believe, is an important distinction to make. What the governor's presented in his budget in terms of a pay plan and a present law adjustment are sort of the two main criteria that were in the previous cap or this agreement that we potentially would do. And I believe that he has within the budget sufficient dollars for us to have that same conversation. And although there's not an action item before you, some sense moving out of this meeting that we're on the right track or remain on the right track is probably appropriate as we approach the legislative session. But I do believe the present law adjustments that are in there are consistent with the numbers that were requested from us and basically rolled up. Each campus rolls their budgets up to the two flagships. The flagships roll it up into the commissioner's office. Ultimately, all of that is consolidated and put into the state accounting system. we worked throughout the summer to reconcile those numbers with the governor's budget office and the budget director. I think we've done that. I think we believe those numbers are funded at the resident student population, which is the important criteria for us, in that it's got to fund the increases on the entire resident student piece of the pie, or it's impossible for us to do. That leaves non-residents piece of the pie, a discussion we'll have to have in May when we discuss tuition. But we do believe that the numbers and the requests are what we asked for and are sufficient to move that part of the conversation forward. The pay plan is very tricky to boil down into a statement, and we haven't seen all those numbers yet, but we anticipate from conversations and from what the governor tells us that that too, as it moves forward, and it's a pre-negotiated plan. But what our request has been in previous tuition discussions is that our employees get treated at least as well as state employees around Montana, and we have every anticipation that that will be the case as we move forward. So I think those two criteria are sort of in place to continue this tuition conversation forward. I think there are a few other pieces that are part of that. As you all know, we had expansion of the vet med program last session, and that program was approved, but it is a 4-year vet program. One legislature can't bind another, and so they approved the program and they funded the first 2 years of the biennium. That said, ultimately that program fully loaded will have about 40 students in it. There's only 11 students in it so far because that's the first cohort that's been entered in, and so that has been funded, but we have to fund the balance of those slots, and that request is in the governor's budget and is fully intact. A WWAMI, similar, a little different nuances, but had some increased slots there, which will need to be fully funded. Those are in the governor's budget. We have full funding of the non-beneficiary money. That is when non-native students attend tribal colleges in Montana, the state of Montana helps pay for some of the cost of that education. I wouldn't want to pretend it's all or even as high as we fund other education in Montana. That is a number that's set in Montana code. A little bit like the Regent Sheehy's question about the 200% yesterday. I don't know if it was sort of where that number came from, but that's the number, and the governor's budget fully funds that number. So I think those pieces are where we hoped they would be, where we wanted them to be. I think the other two pieces that are within that budget is the research funding. Of course, we talked some about that. We had a meeting here on Wednesday about that. The lieutenant governor said yesterday in Bozeman at a meeting, research is a job creator, and I believe that is true, and we're very thankful for that investment. You know, I've walked out of 4 legislative sessions now, and people saying, okay, you got some money, what are you going to do for Montana? How many jobs can you create? How, you know, a lot of what we do is present law adjustment, which by definition means we're going to do the same thing next year that we did last year. And I think this has a way to not only fill jobs and retrain workers and some of the great things that we're doing around the system, but I really do believe it's a job creator. And I think it's a way for us to leverage Montana investment into much greater investments. And so we're very thankful for the governor to put that piece in. The last 2 things I'd mention is all about infrastructure. There's money within the cash portion of his long-range building. I don't know exactly how those bill numbers are going to come out because it sounds like they've combined some. Usually cash is House Bill 5 and bonds is House Bill 14, and there's 6 and 7 in there. It sounds like maybe they will propose one bill with a portion of cash and a portion of bonds, but for us, there's $4.6 million for deferred maintenance, which would be spread across our campuses to the greatest need out of the cash portion of it. And there is several projects within the bond portion, including Romney Hall, Clapp Science Building, some much-needed maze projects, a library renovation in Billings, and an engineering facility renovation in Butte. And so that sort of rounds out, that totals, by the way, $57 million. That sort of rounds out at a very, very high level, in generic terms to some extent, what is in the governor's budget. I said yesterday, I think we truly have a governor that not only talks about education, but believes in education, wants to fund education, is supportive of it from top to bottom, and we want to be a part of that. I'm very thankful for what he's putting forward, and I think we can make work this discussion on tuition. Certainly, that is a right the board has and reserves until May of each year following a legislative session, according to board policy, and that's where that decision will be made. But I'm relatively hopeful that as we understand the nuances of the budget more in the week to come, that we'll be able to move forward with some serious conversations about them funding the requests that we need and us being able to, again, freeze tuition and, as the governor says, avoid what ultimately ends up being sort of a tax on students and families in Montana. So very pleased with where it's moving forward. I can try to answer some questions, but I believe that is sort of the high-level view of where we're at on the budget.
Thank you. And I would just say that I'm glad that you mentioned the flexibility that we have with expenditures, particularly in reference to yesterday's conversation, to ensure that we are doing our best to support our staff and our educators throughout our systems. So any comments or questions? Regent Robinson.
Yeah, I do have a question for the commissioner regarding governor's budget. Does it take into account anything regarding performance-based funding and what he's envisioned for that?
Madam Chair, Regent Robinson, I believe the answer is yes. I mean, we're still sort of following through with that, but the governor said yesterday, and he said along the way, that he envisions his support for this tuition concept would come with all of the present law adjustments going into performance funding. So that's a significant number. A little hard to fully explain what that means for us in a short window of time, because you have to take into account what budget that we would adjust present law from. We go back to the base year, the rest, but in narrow terms, we put about 5% into performance funding in the last iteration, and this would be probably under, but approximately 10%. So it is an increase in the amount that's allocated to performance funding, but fully anticipate that both the legislature and the governor will see that as part of their support for this budget.
Yes.
One other question. Thank you for answering that. And the other question I had was regarding our long-range building plan. The governor, you had mentioned, is accounting for $4.6 million in deferred maintenance. Does that match with what was in our proposal, our proposed budget?
Madam Chair, Regent Robinson, no is the honest answer, but that's fairly consistent with how that piece of the puzzle works. We always have, it's a priority tree in long-range building. And so every year of the session, we always put forth sort of the list of needs within their entirety. That total list is for deferred maintenance is around $30 million for us. We put forth a list of buildings that's $100 and some million, fully anticipating that those projects would be available for the governor to choose from if he so wanted to or was able to, but knowing full and well that likely the list in its entirety wouldn't get funded. So I'm not shocked by this. I think that's a decent number for us. That's considerably more money than we've gotten toward deferred maintenance issues in the last few sessions. And so it's a good start, but sort of the way the process works, we don't anticipate they're ever going to fully fund our list of long-range priorities. But I think it's a fair number and will address some critical needs for us.
Regent Kraus.
Thank you, ma'am. So, yeah, I appreciate a little bit of a discussion on this. I think that the governor has prioritized education through his budget, and we can't lose sight of our responsibility to prioritize within that budget as well. So it doesn't let us off the hook with the kind of processes we saw today out of Billings. Also, I wanted to say that it shouldn't be glossed over what you talked about over the summer, working with the governor's office. When you say we worked with the governor's office, that's the fellow sitting beside you, Mick Robinson, and the financial group and Ochi. They give us a lot of credibility with the governor's budget office and the legislative offices, and that, that's an important piece. And I wanted to thank all my fellow numbers geeks over there, and in particular Mick, for keeping us believable, and our numbers believable. That not freezing expenditures is sort of a double-edged sword in that it is an ollie oxen free, and regardless if they fund tuition, nothing else in the budget is frozen, and so we still have quite a bit of moving pieces there in a budget, because that's only a piece, the resident piece. Having said that, one of my questions, and this is maybe a little bit less budget and a little bit more policy, is there was a change in the federal law regarding veterans, and post 9/11 veterans are to be considered as residents for in-state tuition. And I was wondering, are we anticipating doing anything in the legislature or making any changes in our budget to address that on behalf of the two universities who have to count them as non-residents, and we should all be counting them as residents?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Regent Kraus, you're absolutely right on that. There is a change in federal law. We were having that discussion yesterday. We are part of a national organization I'm a part of, the SHIO, which monitors a lot of that stuff. They sent a statement out yesterday, which we were looking at, that says pretty much none of the states are compliant. We're going to see if over the next few weeks if there's a legislative change. We don't think so in Montana, because truthfully we were already treating those veterans exactly how they'll be treated moving forward, which is they've already been paying that. We've had this discussion before, but the truth is that it's sort of a funding switch in many ways. Our non-resident veterans have been paying in Montana the resident rate. Half of that difference then of the delta between the resident and non-resident has been picked up by the federal government in Yellow Ribbon. That will go away. And so that will definitely have a budget impact. It's about a $4 million bill for us in Montana. We've already been eating about $2 million of that, for good cause, by the way. I don't mean that in a negative light at all, but the other $2 million that Yellow Ribbon was providing will go away. And so certainly going to have to consider that in the budget. I think at this time, the answer to your question is we don't think we need a legislative change. We do think there likely will be some board policy change as it relates to non-resident tuition and that. And that actually takes effect. It's certainly announced now, but it's, is it July of 15, Ron? Yeah, when it actually comes into play. And so either at the March or May meeting, we likely will have some board policy revisions that relates to that.
And then one last thing, follow up. There has been some news about the various discussions with employees and state employees and the governor and that kind of thing. And I think I read something about a large flat rate increase to try to raise some of the lower income people. 2 years ago, we talked about that, and I think it resulted in a $250 increase, right? So that was interesting. You know, it was 2.25 for most negotiations, and then a $250 increase. I do support, and as we go into that, I think that flat rate idea, you know, just coming from a town where the cost of living is you know, barely acceptable for many of our employees, it is one of those things that we need to look at as we go into those discussions as well. So thank you.
Chair, go ahead. Chair Tuss?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a big deal, and I just want to thank Governor Bullock and his administration for what I look at as a pretty good deal for higher education in Montana. I think we've got a real partner in Governor Bullock when it comes not just to higher education in our state, but in education in our state. Within the context of all of the other things the state government does, and that's a very, very long list, I think that we're at a very good point going into this legislative session. If you think about the pay plan, if you think about present law adjustment, if you think about the long-range building program, and if you think about research, I think we're at a pretty good starting point as we approach this next session beginning in January. I'm particularly pleased with the $15 million being proposed for research. We have talked about that, and we've talked about that, and we finally have something on paper that is being presented that I think, if it passes, will have a significant and profound impact on Montana's economy. The folks that we have in the Montana university system that are researchers, they're going to leverage that 20 times, 30 times what that actual dollar amount is. And so I think this is a budget that is not just pro-education and pro-higher education, it's pro-economic growth. Mm-hmm. And I just want to publicly thank Governor Bullock and his administration for putting this forward. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well said, Chair Tuss. Any other comments or questions? Regent Johnstone, you're thinking about it.
Thank you. I think we have to continue to have a conversation about what I think are the three constituencies here that we're serving, either explicitly or implicitly: the students first, the taxpayers of the state, and the faculty. And it's certainly very popular and I think appropriate that in terms of meeting our strategic plan of accessibility and affordability that we address the students' interests first. But I guess I'm skeptical that for a very long period of time we can continue this principle of freezing tuition. And I would like to have more dialogue and information as we move forward, particularly for the 2017 legislative session, about the fairness and equity and reasonableness of continuing that policy. So as we go forward, I hope that we'll continue this dialogue and look at the data and the facts to be able to better assess the relative equity of how we're developing resources and allocating resources.
Thank you,
Madam
Regent
Chair.
Johnstone.
Regent Johnstone, we absolutely will. I think your point is very valid, and somewhere in there it dovetails with the conversation we had yesterday. I mean, 76% of our budget is about people, and so those two conversations need to clearly intersect as we move forward and ultimately try to decide what is the best deal for students and taxpayers and ultimately the faculty and administrators, staffs that serve this system. So we absolutely will continue those conversations as we move forward. They're very important.
Thank you. And thank you for sticking around through 2017. Unless there's other further discussion, I would like to go ahead and adjourn this committee and pass it back to you, Chair Tuss, and hopefully a break.
Thank you, Chair Albrecht. Yes, we're at that point where I think I see some folks fidgeting. So let's do a 15-minute break. Thank you. Welcome back. Welcome back from break. And at this point in the agenda, I am going to turn the mic over to Regent Krause, Chair of our 2-year Education Committee. Regent Krause.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will say this is the first time that I've ever eaten M&Ms that match my shirt and tie, but, you know, and that is a new experience every day. You know, I would just also say that we do tend to get deep in jargon when we're talking here, so for the regents, new and old, you know, don't hesitate to interrupt. Right then, just wave a little bit, windmill a little bit. Anytime we start getting deep into US DOL Tact 4 Montana healthcare jargon. With that, you know, I would note that we heard today at breakfast, you know, something about our efforts towards people, you know, who may be low income. And one of the places we're going after is re-educating workforce. And that effort, regardless of where it's located, is being overseen by Dr. Seck and the 2-year committee. It is being performed by the campuses, the 2-year campuses and the 4-year campuses, non-research campuses. Most of the work you'll see today really does come from the work of committees that are made up by the, led by Dr. Seck and performed by people who have other jobs within the university system. So my gratitude to them, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Seck for a brief overview of the $15 million Montana healthcare grant.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just a couple of brief introductions before we get into that. First of all, each of you have on your table a summary from MSU Billings City College of the 2nd annual Student Research Day of Montana's 2-year colleges, which was held in April of 2014. This is really impressive and relates to the research work that is happening at our state's 2-year and community colleges. This is the 2nd event. The first one began at Highlands College in 2013, and Great Falls College, MSU, will hold the 2015 event. So just wanted to make sure you received that, and thanks to Dean Kratke for providing that. I think, as Regent Krause mentioned, there's a lot of work going on in partnership across the state with all of our 2-year community and tribal colleges. And I would just like to preface the introduction of the Montana Healthcare Grant with a couple of things. As the commissioner mentioned earlier, on Wednesday we held a strategic planning meeting of all of the 2-year leaders here in this building, talking about how we can use all of these funds to make a difference in the state. And then in the afternoon, joining the commissioner and President Cruzado and President Engstrom, the 2-year leaders presented an update on the work that they've been doing to extend the comprehensive mission at each of their campuses. And as I reflect back on what happened on Wednesday and the work that was shared with the presidents and commissioner, I think with respect to 2-year education, Montana really is at the forefront of educational reform on many fronts. As you really dig down and think about it and look at what was included in both TAC consortium proposals, and I think why we were funded, we're really incorporating a lot of things such as developmental education reform, the work that's taken place. You'll hear in a few minutes from Bob Curry about the work that he is doing with his team in expanding Ed Ready. We've heard a lot over the last 2 days about dual credit expansion, but again, that is a big piece of the workforce development efforts that are taking place. You heard yesterday from Assistant Superintendent York about the partnerships taking place between OPI and our 2-year and community colleges. I would say the partnership has never been stronger and has never been better. You're going to hear in a few moments from Sue Jones and Chancellor Nook about work that's taken place to reach adults and how we can really extend our efforts to serve the adult learner, the 25 to 60-year-old in the state, including returning veterans. A lot of work is happening on an ongoing basis. We talked a lot about it on Wednesday, but the work that's taken place with Pillar 1 in Main Street, Montana, and our 2-year in community colleges, and really connecting the TAC grants with that. And then finally, and we'll highlight this in the spring, but our partnership with the Department of Labor and Industry and the State Workforce Investment Board is absolutely amazing. In fact, in visiting with other 2-year and community college leaders across the country, I think the partnership we have with Commissioner Busey in that office is probably the envy of many states. And then our partnership with the tribal colleges, as we've heard about yesterday, and the fact that we had tribal college representation in our planning meeting on Wednesday, and the report out with the presidents and commissioner on Wednesday, I think was absolutely significant. And then finally, before I introduce Dean Baker, I would just like to bring your attention to a brief summary I prepared for the commissioner a few weeks ago about TAC 1 through TAC 4 and Montana's participation in that. Basically, if you look at the TAC 1 through TAC 4 grants that were awarded to the Montana university system, that totals right around $45 million. If you add in the money that the tribal colleges received on their own from their own applications, the total TAC 1 through TAC 4 to Montana is about $52 million. I think it's worth looking at what's happened in some other states. Idaho was about 14.6 million, Nebraska about 18 million, Nevada 23.9 million, Utah 12.5 million, Oregon about 29 million, and Wyoming about 10.5 million. I think that really represents the incredible leadership of our 2-year community college and tribal college presidents, deans, and the faculty who have really come to the table to work together across the board and work with other agencies and work with business and industry to get things done. And the theme of our retreat on Wednesday was, how can we utilize these grants to achieve transformation and achieve a vision in Montana for workforce development, not just check the boxes and tell the Department of Labor, we did this, we did that, but how can we really achieve transformation? So it is my pleasure now to introduce Jane Baker, who has taken over as the interim dean of Missoula College. And as many of you know, Jane was the longtime dean of what is now Highlands College at Montana Tech, and served as interim president at Dawson Community College, and now she is leading Missoula College. Jane Baker.
Long-term dean. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'm here today to present to you the Montana Healthcare Grant. And I just re-entered the system in time to be a part of a very exciting project for the state. As you know, this grant is also called a TAC 4 grant. We use the names interchangeably. And the award is approximately $15 million. And who's advancing, John? Okay.
Elizabeth.
All right. We have 19 consortium partners. 15 are 2-year and community and tribal colleges, with Missoula being the lead college. The next 3 slides, I'm not going to read through this, but it shows the amount of the award for each college. We'll be presenting later on the actual budget. I think the important thing is the additional consortium partners, and one of our partners is the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, and I have my panelists that will come up here in a few minutes. All right. Annie Glover from the Montana Department of Labor and Industry worked on this grant, and as well as Chris Juliar, who is with us today representing Area Health Education Centers, and Vida Wilkinson, who is our PI for the project. And the third one is the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Ed, and of course the Montana Career Information System, of which both OPI and OCHI support. On the contracts, Missoula's college portion of the grant is the $8,727,000, but it also includes funds that are contracted to other units, and you can see what those units are. And again, I'll be presenting on that with more detail. The purpose of the grant is to create access to healthcare employment opportunities across the state and streamlining our healthcare talent pipeline to fill the high demand jobs. And you can see our various partners in fulfilling this purpose. Our goals are twofold: trying to bring training to where the jobs are, and then successful employment for our students with special attention to the adult learner, particularly in rural locations, as well as our veterans. We have 10 strategies for the program. We're integrating our planning. The first one, we're integrating our planning for forecasting jobs with Montana Department of Labor and Industry. We are going to create a healthcare registered apprenticeship program, the first time in the state. The faculty, nursing faculty, will review and redesign curriculum. An exciting part of this is having a laddering concept where students can enter the health professions at the Certified Nurse Assistant program, moving into the licensed practical nurse, moving into the RN, which is the associate nurse, and then to the BSN. Continuing on with the strategies, the development of a separate LPN credential, a creation of a common nursing curriculum, and that's not going to be easy, but a common nursing curriculum at the 8 two-year colleges, including the 2 tribal colleges with nursing programs. We're also going to develop a core curriculum. We have a whole host of programs out there: radiology, surg tech, respiratory care, for example, and to develop a common core curriculum for all of those programs throughout the state. Will also help in the ease of students moving from program to program. And then a coordination of a statewide clinical placement. Continuing with the strategies, we're going to be increasing our distance education opportunities in rural Montana. Our targeted population is the adult learner, so we will be providing online tutoring, and also Ed Ready will support their needs as adult learners. We also have the MCIS online, which is a career planning program, and that will be utilized also. There are 5 AHEC regions with a career coach in each area, and these coaches are a bridge between the colleges, the industry, and the job service. And then we'll be connecting with the state's current prior learning assessment, which you're going to hear in a few minutes, task force, which is a current task force initiative. The outcomes to be measured, you can see those there. We will measure the students' success throughout the program and also their employment outcomes. And over the course of the grant, we will impact approximately 2,500 people. The staff, as you can see, we have a current project director, has been hired, but we have our work is ahead of us in terms of hiring staff. If you go down 3/4 of the way down, you see a healthcare transformation specialist. These are going to be located at each of the 15 campuses, and they're like a grant coordinator. The tasks ahead of us: in October 31st, we held our very first steering meeting, which included representatives from all of our partners as well as industry. December 3rd, we will have our big rollout meeting for the grant held here at Missoula College. We have a very aggressive, continuing on, we have a very aggressive task ahead of us. And beginning the first of the year, faculty will be getting together throughout the state, developing curriculum and apprenticeship programs and other tasks. Governor Bullock has been supportive of the grant, and he recognizes that a strong economy requires a talented and a trained workforce. Commissioner Christian has also been very supportive. You heard John Seck say that it is one of his top priority is to support the success and the implementation of both the TAC 3 and the TAC 4 grant. The Montana Department of Labor has forecasted that the state will need to hire approximately 1,300 healthcare workers each year through the year 2022. Our work with industry and consortium partners will make a huge difference in preparing adult learners for these jobs. I'd like to close in saying, Lynn Stocking played a huge role in writing this grant. She will be missed, but her legacy will live on. I am available for questions as well as our panel up here. Thank you.
Thank you for that sort of introductory
yes.
talk. Questions from the regents, questions from the subcommittee or the regents? Oh, yes, Major. Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Jeff. Couple of things. Thank you for the presentation. That's very well thought through, and it's good to see that it's well underway right now. A couple things. One thing I wanted to mention was that it's great, again, to see the entire collaboration and how it's working. You've heard me speaking from time to time to also reach out to those tribal colleges and once again, this has been very effective in doing that and building those strong relationships and giving those, spreading those education opportunities throughout the state. 5 tribal colleges out of 7. I mean, that's quite substantial. So, and then 10 other university system campuses that will be impacted by this. So I think that's great. I'm curious. My question is regarding your partnerships. Are you working with some of the, I imagine you'd be working with some of the hospitals throughout Montana, and how are you collaborating with them?
Okay. Annie, would you like to address that question?
Mr. Chair, Regent Robinson, there are 39 partners across the state that are private industry partners that have signed on to formally support the healthcare grant. They signed on during the writing of the grant, and they committed to participating in curriculum development, to participating in hosting clinical placements at their locations, and this includes, the 39 employers includes the largest hospitals in Montana as well. They also agreed to participate in the creation and hosting of the registered apprenticeship programs that we'll be creating across the state. And they'll also be formally involved in the planning and the ongoing implementation of the grant through the 5 councils, the regional workforce councils that will be hosted by AHEC, and they'll be also supported by the data analyst that we have at the Department of Labor. So they'll be formally involved with that. We're also formally working with Governor Bullock's Healthcare Key Industry Network. Larry White is one of the co-chairs of that network, and he was involved in the writing of this grant, and so that will be a very well integrated part of our efforts to make sure the industry is involved.
Mr. Chair, Regent Robinson, just a quick additional comment. We also worked very closely with MHA, the Montana Hospital Association, in the development of the grant, and they are involved in the execution. And I'm also hoping that Chris Juilliard from the MSU Office of Rural Health can speak to the focus groups which were held this spring with the nursing professionals around the state.
Mr. Chair, and yes, we have a project looking at nursing education in Montana through the Area Health Education Centers. I'm Chris Juilliard, the director of the state office. and held focus groups all around the state in about a dozen locations, getting input on the needs for nursing education from healthcare providers and organizations and nurses throughout and campuses throughout the state. And so that information was used in the writing of the grant, as well as we also have a statewide healthcare workforce advisory committee that was started actually by Office of Commissioner of Higher Education about 9 years ago. And we've been staffing that ever since, and that has extensive industry involvement. And they gave a lot of input into the goals of the project as well.
That's very helpful. Yes, Ms. Sheehy.
I have a couple of questions. Jane, you mentioned that this would impact 2,500 people. Are those students?
Those would be students, yes. And I believe it would be students in some form, either students in the program, students going through the coaching in all areas of the state.
That's not a ripple effect figure. That's the people who are coming into the program who will be accessing our program for educational opportunities.
That's correct. Is that correct, Mr. Sack, from the numbers?
And when you say 2,500 people, are you thinking that's the total of this program, or is that an annual figure?
Mr. Chair, Regent Sheehy, that is the total net impact forecasted during the 3-year period of the grant. The 4th year is evaluation, and that would include students in everything from, a CNA program to possibly even a student. Another dimension of this program will include a 48 credit bridge from the 2-year associate degree nurse to a BSN nurse. So it could include students there, and it could include students in new apprenticeship programs, which are really a partnership between the 2-year colleges and the Montana Department of Labor and Industry to reach the rural parts of Montana.
Okay. The Common Core curriculum, how far along are you in the development of that?
Chairman and Regent Sheehy, I believe we've just started that. There has been discussions in years past when I was in the system for this, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
Because each one of the health programs have their own special needs. But it seems to me that there should be a core of English and math and those core things that would apply to all programs. So we're just starting that process.
And are you planning on using Common Course numbering so that you talked a little bit about transferability of these credits amongst the various units. Is that something that's been talked about?
Mr. Chairman and Regent Sheehy, I was not in that discussion, but I'm sure I heard yesterday on the Common Core numbering, I'm sure it would be, and it would have to be in order to be transferable throughout the state.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And Mr. Chair, Regent Sheehy, just to add to that, Common Course numbering will be a huge piece of that, and also all of the work that's being done. There's a lot of curricular work that'll be done statewide, which Dean Baker mentioned, and that's, of course, faculty driven. The faculty obviously are going to be at the core of that work. And then the Commissioner just made a good comment relating to your previous question about the 2,500 people. Obviously, that's a slice in time for the 3-year period of this grant, but that, those programs and efforts will be ongoing.
That was my follow-up question is, now that I know it's a 3-year and then you have a 4th year that has some impact, these are programs that will continue after the existence of the grant. The grant's getting us up and running. We're in the planning stage. And when do we start actually educating students through the grant?
In some areas, it'll be in the next 9 months.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm going to go to Regent Johnstone next.
Actually, my questions, I think, have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A couple of things, and I think one of the things I wanted to talk about, there are many slides back. It talks about this grant, the objectives of this grant, and those are, I think, important, strategies and particular goals. I can't remember which is which sometimes, But I think it is important to look at, and maybe Dr. Seck, you could talk about it a little bit, to look at the goals and outcomes of this of this grant, because it is a little different. This is not maybe, this has a lot of curriculum focus. It has a lot of common course numbering of, we're trying to do with this grant maybe what we spent a lot of time doing. And this grant for healthcare and healthcare education, what we spent a lot of time doing otherwise. And there was a term that we used, that we're using to sync up, and that's not the term, business education between the 2 years, the 4 years, and the flagships, and I can't remember what that's called. Can you, if you can remind me what that term is, and also talk a little bit about, expand a little bit on the goals that are non-right to the, not where we're actually paying people to attend college or to take these classes, but to improve our educational offerings overall.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, great question. And I think, when the group, the writing team, many of whom are here today, started working on this a good 6 months before the SGA came out from the Department of Labor, and we're working really hard with industry and with organizations like MHA. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that we really wanted to focus on is how can we reach rural Montana? How can we reach areas that we're not reaching right now? And through the integration of the colleges working together, learning from Swami and what we've been piloting there with Dean Wolf and her team, online education, PLA, apprenticeships. How can we expand our outreach beyond the urban areas to really reach into those areas? And I'll give you an example. The other night at the Leadership Montana dinner, the CEO of Wheatland Memorial Hospital, Mike Zwicker, was there, and we were chatting, and he actually didn't even know about this grant. But in the course of our conversation, he was talking about how he can't find CNAs, he can't find LPNs, he's having a difficult time staffing his hospital because, for one thing, he's competing with the Bakken in Harlowton, Montana. And so when we started talking about the goals and objectives of this grant and what we're trying to do, he got excited. And he wanted to know how could Wheatland Memorial Hospital get involved with this project? And I told him, you're involved. We're connecting you with Dean Baker right away. But I think that's the difference. I think that is what we're doing. And we have every single two-year college and tribal college that has healthcare programs tied to this grant, from large cities to small cities across the state. And I think the opportunity to get all of these folks working together for the common good of the state is going to have a huge difference. And the connection with the Office of Rural Health at MSU, the AHEX, the Department of Labor, and the 39 now, we're at 40 industry partners is tremendous. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Dr. Seck. We haven't heard from one of the key players in this, and when I read things, and it was somewhere on one of the slides, Montana Career Information System, when I think about the person that says, how do I, maybe they're a CNA and they want to become a LPN and something like that, and they're working at one of the rural areas, and they say, how can I get into this thing? One of the key players is the Department of Labor and Industry. Thanks so much to leadership in the Department of Labor and Industry for this. Could you tell us, is there something you'd like to tell us about how we're involved in the individual? If I'm a person that wants to do that, how am I going to get to there?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. And again, my name is Annie Glover with the Department of Labor and Industry. So there are several reasons why we're very excited about this grant. And one of the reasons is that we serve populations that are adult populations who've been out of school for a significant period of time, who may be transitioning out of industries such as the timber industry. And that's really the focus of the TACT grant, is to look at folks who are transitioning out of industries that are trade affected and to bring them into industries that they have greater opportunities for high paying jobs in their local community. And really that healthcare answers that call for Montana. And so the Montana Career Information System is a partnership between the Department of Labor, OCHI, and the OPI. And the system currently has about 96,000 users across the state. Those users range from middle schools to high schools to users who come into our job service offices. We also have users at the prisons who are looking at their transition out of prison into the workforce. And the Montana Career Information System provides those users with a planning tool so that they can look and see what kind of wages they might expect to be paid regionally in the careers they're looking at, what the career ladders are for those specific careers and how they need to prepare, where they can go to school, what kind of financial aid they can get. And so the Montana Career Information System we see as an essential tool in this system to make it so that the same level of information is available to everybody statewide. Right now, a student at a high school has a little bit more support to go into the career information system than an adult learner may think that they have, but they can go into the job service and get that support. And so the Montana Career Information System provides that platform for the job service intake specialist to provide that information to the job seeker, for the career coaches to look at that information, as well as the schools to be able to look at that and say, we can transfer a student over. We have this, their transcript matches, they've completed the healthcare core, and they can move easily through the system.
Thank you very much for that summary. Yes, Regent Robinson.
Chair Krause, thank you. I think this question is best directed towards Dean Baker. And if I've missed this in the conversation, I'm sorry, sometimes I take notes, but has there been discussion as far as the strategy for sustainability of this? Because certainly the grant is wonderful to have for the 3 to 4 years, but it should also include some type of discussion about how this continues, because there is a need and there will probably continue to be a need after 4 years. So has there been some discussion regarding that?
Mr. Chair, and Regent Robinson, there has been, and there is the sustainability is that the nursing curriculum and the core curriculum will stay, and it will continue on. And the apprenticeship model will continue on. We're not investing in equipment, we're investing in curriculum. And what won't continue on would be the tutoring services and the career coaches that would require other sources of funding if they should continue that on. So yes, it's primarily the curriculum and for the nursing, as well as tying in that laddering concept from program to program in nursing, and also developing that core curriculum and the apprenticeship program.
Mr. Chair,
yes,
Regent Robinson, just to expand on that, in the meeting that we had on Wednesday afternoon with President Cruzado, President Engstrom, and the Commissioner, the deans spoke about the incredible value that they've been receiving from the workforce navigators in the SWAMI grant, and the role that those navigators are playing in connecting business and industry, not only for curricular purposes, but also ultimately retention of students. And the coaches in connection with the AHECs are really serving the same function. So I think the hope is that through the impact of those positions that and retention of students, that the campuses might be able to sustain those types of positions as well.
And I wanted to answer the question a little bit too, and that is that I look at the consortium members and I look at the panel and I think about the delivery of healthcare in rural Montana and how critical it is to not just have the jobs, but to have the healthcare, right? That I would hope that as we prove this concept and that it begins to work and the partnerships work, that we would find that this rises to a level of a priority. But regardless, the consortium members and the curriculum, as Dr. Baker said, that remains. And that will be exceptional work for this grant. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir. I can't call you Mr. Juno, so that's what the sign says.
Sir is fine. Chairman Kraus and committee members, Dr. Baker. This is just sort of a reminder of where we may be able to be helpful in this whole process. Is that one of our strongest and growing career and technical ed areas is health science. So we're continually working on getting secondary teachers trained through Project Lead the Way on being health science educators. We have a very active health occupation student association that is moving through the state and actually growing quite fast. So just as a memory item, we're there. If there's anything we can do, particularly when it comes to looking at gap analysis from the types of things that we're producing in curriculum to what is going to go into the curriculum that's developed, we'd be surely happy to sit down with you on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, don't forget those high schools, right? Yeah. Other comments? Any comments from the panel? All right. Well, just want to thank all of our partners and all the hard work from everybody on this list of consortium members.
Thanks. And just for the record, I'm Dean Baker.
Dean Baker.
Not doctor.
Yes, okay.
Unless I get an honorary. You know.
Yeah, okay. Oh, we can work on that later.
I'll work on that later.
Because remember, it was a long term.
A long term,
yeah.
that's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will go on to the second thing, Dr. Sack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll ask Susan Jones and Bob Curry, or not Bob Curry, Chancellor Nook to come forward. The Commissioner created a statewide task force focusing on prior learning assessment, and that task force has been working very hard since last summer, and Ms. Jones and Dr. Nook are here to provide you with a very brief update on the concept and what the task force is doing.
Chairman Kraus, Chairman Tuss, members of the board, I'm really pleased to have this time to speak with you about prior learning assessment, or PLA, and the work of the Montana University System PLA Task Force. Many of the members which are here today, and just want to have a shout out to the good work they've done. Prior learning assessment is an assessment process that may allow adults to earn credit for college-level learning from other sources, such as individual intellectual pursuits or corporate and military training and education programs, just to name a couple of things. It's an avenue for a student to demonstrate college-level learning in a rigorous and a validated way. PLA is assessing learning, not counting seat time. For students, earning PLA credit means demonstrating and documenting your learning and essentially making your case and proving it. Credit should be awarded only for learning and not just for experience. If we look at the slide that they're going to pull up, we know that we've had a goal from President Obama and Governor Bullock to have our citizens in the state of Montana to have a 60% degree attainment by 2025. When you look at this particular slide, you can see the orange line on the top is our annual benchmark to reach 60% by 2025. And on the bottom line, the blue line, that's the expected percentages of degree holders among 25 to 64 years of age. That is our workforce age at the current rate. So you can see already on that second line in 2014 that we're already 2% below target. And because of our demographics, our aging workforce in the state of Montana, and our shrinking high school pipeline, we can see that by 2025 we will be well short of that goal, about 13%, if we continue doing things the way we are doing them. So our workforce has an increasing need for workers with a higher education credential. and go to the next slide. I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but at the top there you can see the levels of education for Montana residents currently for ages 25 to 64 years of age, our workforce. You can see in the top, the third line down, high school graduates, including high school equivalency. These are people that have graduated from high school or gotten their high set or GED and are no longer going to college because of their age, right? They're not in college. So that's 28% of our workforce age people. One line down, you can see the people with some college, no degree. That's 26% of our Montanans in that workforce age. So that equates to 54% of our workforce age folks that we have a potential that PLA could make some impact on. It's not the only thing, but it's one of the things that could have a great impact on our workforce. So what are we doing about PLA with our task force? Well, last winter we did a survey of all of Montana University System 2- and 4-year campuses, and we found out that all the campuses are doing some form of prior learning assessment. But our policies and processes are varied. They're not widely utilized, and really the awareness among our faculty, staff, and students is quite low. So we had a PLA task force that was formed. The campus presidents, deans, and CEOs nominated folks from the respective campuses, and we had about 30 people appointed by Commissioner Christian to do this task force work. And what we're doing is looking at what we can do to streamline this, create more awareness. We have a broad coalition of faculty, staff, and students, a representative from the Department of Labor and from the Governor's Office, as well as some consultants from CALE, the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, on this task force. We've went through some training to better understand all the varied forms of PLA, which has been available throughout the university system for folks on a webinar basis. We've had a PLA summit in Helena. We had about 80 people attend for public awareness. And we're also going to have some advisor training in December for advisors who want to know more about how to work with adults and look at possibilities, including PLA as an option. The task force is an excellent group. They've done a great job. We've had months of deliberating and writing a policy draft at a high-level system policy level. And so we're looking at standards and best practices, recommendations, but we also want to make sure that we have flexibility at the campus level. That's very important to this group. We've had guidance from CALE. I mentioned the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning. And CALE is a 40-year-old nonprofit whose PLA standards are recognized by our regional accrediting body. In fact, all accrediting bodies across the United States. So next steps. This winter, the task force will spend some time sharing this draft policy recommendation with more of our Montana University System faculty and staff to gain further input and feedback. And our goal is to bring forth a draft policy to you in the spring. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chancellor Nook.
Thank you, Chair Krause, members of the committee. I just want to make a couple comments about PLA in general and why I think this is the right time to do it, and maybe we should have been doing it a little bit earlier as a system. One of the things that is often brought up about PLA is that we have to make sure that the quality controls are in place. And that really is one of the Regents' jobs here, is to make sure that we have policies in place that will assure that the quality of the education that our students receive and that we credential as faculty, as administrators, and as the Regents is up to the standards, regardless of how that's delivered or credentialed. One of the things with PLA that has been a difficulty in other systems is making sure that it can be transferred from one institution to another. That really shouldn't be an issue if we have good policies and practices in place and we have a level of quality assurance so that one institution knows that what another institution is doing has the same quality standards that they would have if they were to do that same learning assessment. And I think this is the right time to put a policy in place and for us to really consider this as a system for several reasons. But one of them is if you look over sort of the history of PLA, prior learning assessment, you go back 30 years, this really did sort of develop as a way for adults to get some credit for experience. And over the years, we've developed several things that have really pushed that to where now we can assess the learning that's happened in the context of learning outcomes of courses. When I first started as a faculty member, people were talking about learning objectives. We really didn't know how to define them very well. In the time since then, we've gotten very good at being able to, for each course, for programs, for entire universities, writing a set of learning outcomes that every student should walk away with when they complete a course, they complete a program, they complete a degree. And once we're able to write those learning outcomes, we've also now gotten to the point where we're very effective at developing and writing rubrics and metrics upon which to test and evaluate the students to see that they have the skills, the knowledges, and the habits of mind, the ways of thinking that would be developed in that course or in that program. At the point that we can write those outcomes, at the point that we have the rubrics and the metrics and we know how to develop those and we know how to assess them, we can effectively take a person who hasn't sat in the classroom but has gained the knowledge through self-study, through a work activity, through other activities, and can demonstrate that they have the same knowledges, the same skills, those same habits of mind that a student would have that sat in that classroom, that was in the classroom through an entire program. Measure them, and then adequately place that person in the program, in the courses in that program that they need to complete it, or to even provide them with other things they might do to come back and test. This really isn't a new idea. PLA's been around for years. In fact, many of you may actually have been involved in things like CLEP, an exam, a test-out exam. AP credits are really parts of PLA. These students didn't sit in our classroom. They may have been in a high school classroom, but they don't get the credit for being in the class. They get the credit for the test they take and the demonstration of learning and of skills that they have. And so what we really need to do, I think, as a system is to create the high-level policies and procedures that our institutions can come up and put in the practices in place so that we can make sure that the quality is there and so that we're comfortable transferring a student who takes a PLA experience, tests out, however that is, at Bozeman, I'm comfortable taking them at Billings or Havre to Missoula. It doesn't matter, because we have some assurance, we have some trust in the faculty there that they have done their jobs. One last comment is I think about the role of faculty as teachers. I think they have three roles when they enter that classroom. One is to guide learning. It's what we think of as teaching. We used to call teaching, but really to help that student understand and master the material. The second is to assess that learning, to be able to say, yes, they have met the knowledges and the skills and the habits of mind at the level that say they're ready for the next course or they're ready to move on. They're ready for us to do the third phase of things we do, and that's credential that learning. Award a grade in a class, possibly even award a diploma. We're now at a place where we can do that well and understand that faculty can not just guide that learning, but assess learning, whether that learning has happened in their classroom or outside of their classroom. So I think it is the right time for us to put together a system-wide policy on how this can be done that will guide our institutions. And it's time for us to think about the procedures. This transferability and keeping the record, how we put these things into the student record and on the transcripts is a difficult task for us to undertake. And it's central to it. It's the mechanics. But I think the group we've got together and the work we've laid down now, the foundations we have in place to be able to do the work effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nook. I boiled that. It is amazing to hear you discuss it, really. It is. That's twice now I've heard you talk about it, and both times I've become convinced that we can create those high-level policies and procedures that you're talking about. It is a lot of work, but you're inspirational. You really are. So thank you for talking about that. Questions from the committee or the regents about prior learning assessment, or from anyone at the table here? Yes, sir.
Chair Krause and members of the committee, I would like to speak a little bit as one of the faculty representatives on this task force. I was invited to join the task force, and I need to tell you that I was an agnostic or maybe a skeptic about PLA as I joined. one of the knee-jerk reactions of a faculty member is going to be about let's see to the rigor, let's see to the quality. And there were a few encouraging studies that have come out about PLA that suggest that giving an incoming student a few PLA credits results in increased persistence, increased number of courses taken at the college or university, and increased graduation rates. That is, a few PLA credits serves as a catalyst, and it enhances engagement with higher education. And this serves a couple of purposes. It's going to help fill our pipeline. We have right now a dip in the number of high school graduates. We also want to outreach to military personnel and other adult learners, and this looks like a good tool. Still, you know, of the 30 task force members, there were 4 faculty members, and a lot of what this is visibility and logistics. This is really, you know, this is why we had advisors on the task force and administrators and registrars on the task force. And the job that I saw of the faculty is to make sure that we look at quality here. One of the ideas that has come out a few times in this task force is to be able to track the progress of students who come in with PLA, to make sure that they're succeeding after they come in. You know, the last thing that we want to do is tell a student that they have the equivalent learning experience to something that they would have gotten on campus and then not succeed in subsequent classes. And this would bump in very uncomfortably, it would bump into performance-based funding. If we set a situation up where our students are not poised to succeed, then we can do ourselves a disservice. But what we don't want to do is write the guidelines that that speak to these small possibilities that something is going to go wrong. We want to go forward with this as a catalyst. It looks like it does work, but we really do want to be able to track the students, and we don't want to stigmatize courses that are gained by prior learning by putting some special designation on them, but we would like to be able to track them, for example, with a section number or something, so that we can make sure that we're doing what we want to do. One other thing that I want to emphasize is that we really do need to do this right, because some states, for example, the state of Washington, they have a program that's available to some high school students called Running Start. And these students who are in urban areas can take a lot of college courses in their junior and senior years as high school students and get their high school diploma along with an AA degree. And so that is, you know, it's science fiction in Montana right now, but it is a possible outcome of prior learning assessment. And this is really an honest question to our employers in the state. Is that the kind of post-secondary credential that you want? I mean, an 18-year-old high school student that also has an AA degree, as part of Complete College Montana, as part of the demands of the employers in the state, is this the kind of degree that you're looking for? So this is, you know, PLA, we don't want to put too many limits on it. It's possible that students will be able to accumulate a lot of credits this way. Is this really exactly what our employers want? And it's really an honest question, and it's a possible outcome of this type of enterprise. So let's keep an eye on quality. Let's go with it. The data look good. It's a good catalyst. It's going to get more students in the pipeline. It's good for us. It's good for the students. It'll save money. But let's really keep track of it. We do not want to sacrifice quality. You know, courses are not perfunctory. We don't want to check things off and give students credit where they haven't really earned it and we don't have appropriate rigor. So I'll stop there. Thank you for your time.
No, that's very valuable contribution to the discussion. So thank you very much. Other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? Just want to assure the faculty and provosts out there, I came out from working 13 years in the train yard and clept English right away. And I don't think I used most of those words in the train yard, but there you go. Or good grammar. But it can give you, my experience was exactly as you said, being able to have some credits right away really did inspire me to keep going. And I think that as an adult, as a student over traditional age, that was important for the investment in higher education. So thank you, that was a great observation. Any other comments on this issue? Then we will move on to C. Thank you very much for all your work and your inspiration. And we'll move on to C, scaling of Ed Ready statewide update. And the first thing I want you to do, Dr. Seck, is tell us what scaling means.
Mr. Chair, and I also just want to thank our PLA panel and also do a shout out for Sue Jones, who's done an extraordinary job leading this effort. Mr. Chair, scaling of Ed Ready, basically what we're talking about is using the funds from the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation gift, the $2.4 million, to make Ed Ready available to anyone in the state of Montana who wants it, from high schools, junior highs, up through college. And Mr. Curry, the director of the Digital Academy, is going to tell us how he's doing it. Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of this meeting today. Earlier, Dr. Seck referred to our team at the Digital Academy and the work that we're doing. And when it comes to Ed Ready, I wanted to introduce you to our program manager, who's a vital member of this team and is leading what we call the rollout of Ed Ready, not necessarily the scaling of Ed Ready throughout the state. And with me today is Dr. Ryan Schrenk, who is the program manager for Ed Ready, and he would be happy to answer any questions if you have them of him as well. As Dr. Seck introduced, and just as a quick reminder back to when I visited with you previously, we are using the money that we have received in the gift from the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation to both field test and then roll out Ed Ready throughout the state of Montana, making it available to all students grades 7 through 12 and higher ed, including any student who is interested in higher ed and taking advantage of that throughout the state of Montana. So we have the ability right now in this 3-year project to annually offer an Ed Ready account so a student could enroll and use Ed Ready to 150,000 individuals across the state of Montana each year of the 3 years. So what we'd like to do very briefly this morning is to give you an update on the project and hopefully kind of frame for you where we're headed with the project and see if we can help you kind of visualize when we talk about rollout what we're intending to do. Next slide, please. So as we were getting started, you did see some numbers up there. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But really, when it comes to higher education, we are finding right now that there are 2 very distinct use cases for Ed Ready. One of them is to use it in the classroom as a companion in a concurrent usage to augment instruction, allowing for the teacher or the instructor to provide more differentiation. And we just had an opportunity to visit Highlands College this week in Butte and see this in action, where students were highly engaged with Ed Ready and asking questions and getting support from their instructor in that process. What the second bullet there is kind of the important piece in that particular use case, because what we're beginning to find is that it often leads to more rapid course completion, and in the case of some students, they're able to complete more than one mathematics course in the course of a semester. The second very large area that is a use case for EdReady is preparation for placement assessment in a mathematics course. When I spoke to you previously, we talked about the pilot that was conducted here on this campus in 2013. That pilot has now morphed into usage here at UM and particularly Gallatin/MSU for that very use case. In other words, providing EdReady to students who have not fared as well as they would like on their particular math placement test, giving them the opportunity to increase their math skills and then retake that test with the intent to be placed at a higher level. And that the data on that continues to be very, very positive. Next slide, please. So the chart that came up before these slides actually showed individual breakdown of enrollments, but at this point in time, this kind of gives you a feel in our rollout process where we are. Keep in mind, we received this gift last February, and we really began rolling this out this summer and into this fall. So currently, 57% of the usage is at 9 higher education institutions, though Ryan would tell you that many others have expressed interest, have been establishing accounts, but at this point in time have not gotten to the point where they've actually enrolled students for usage. We have 19 middle and high schools, so that they make up 38% of our enrollments. 5 of the adult basic learning centers are now using, but again, many others have expressed interest and are beginning to develop their accounts and get their students enrolled. And then we have the ability in EdReady for what we would call an individual or walk-up type of user, someone who is not affiliated with any particular institution, school in the state, that can actually come to the website, enroll in EdReady, and participate. We do try to get some demographic information from them so that we could find out if, where they're living, some information about them so that our data will be complete. But we do have that opportunity, even though what we're encouraging both at the higher education level and at the secondary level is to work with the schools, because we think that level of support is critical so that students can be successful and use the tool to its fullest advantage. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that I was going to try to give you a feel for what we're doing with the rollout. And we have divided the state, these are our arbitrary divisions of the state, into 4 regions. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about how we are servicing those regions. Then what we have also done, and I think I mentioned this previously, but each version of EdReady at an institution has some customization for that institution. Not only in the fact that mathematics instructors and math leaders at that particular school have the ability to structure the EdReady program as they see fit to meet their student needs and to answer that question, what do I want my students to be ready for when it comes to mathematics? But also, Ryan and his team have actually customized the look and feel of that version of EdReady so that, as you can see from these examples, as a student enters EdReady at their particular college or university, they will see the EdReady logo in their school colors with their school logo. Just a small touch, but we do it the same thing with the high schools just to make them feel more comfortable and really know that they're in the right spot for their needs. Next slide, please. So this is how we're rolling EdReady out. We are right now in the process of finding and hiring part-time ambassadors for EdReady for each of the 4 regions of the state that we have higher education institutions in. And In those regions, then that ambassador will actually travel to the institutions, sit down with the staff, help them customize, first identify their needs and take them from the identification process to a customized version of Ed Ready, and then implementing Ed Ready with their students. And then they will remain that communication piece between Ryan and his team here on campus at the Montana Digital Academy and the local students and site facilitators. We have about half of our ambassadors in place. We have 2 of the 4 at higher ed. Next slide, please. And then just to round this out, we have taken the 9 superintendent regions from the school administrators of Montana, following the Office of Public Instruction's lead, and really kind of partnering with them. And so we will have regional ambassadors for middle and high schools in each of those regions, and we're roughly halfway there on those as well. And then finally, we actually are going to have 2 ambassadors very soon that will be dedicated to the high schools that are on reservations in the state. So they will have 2, the state will be kind of divided into 2 regions that way, and they will work with them. What we're finding right now is we probably have double the number of accounts established for Ed Ready than we do have active users in those accounts. So those accounts are very, very ripe. Those schools, those 2- and 4-year institutions are ripe for an ambassador to call and take them from the informational stage and interest stage into implementation. Sometimes they just need a little bit of assistance from us, and that's what the ambassador project is all about. Those people will work as part-time temporary employees during the school year, and then we'll start it up again in the fall. Next slide. Are we done? I thought we were. Okay. I wasn't sure. So hopefully that provides you with the update. We have about 3,000 enrollments. By the end of today, we do our census count on Fridays. We'll have about 3,000 enrollments in Ed Ready. We're shooting by the end of this school year to be at least 10,000, hopefully 12,000 student users in Ed Ready throughout the state of Montana. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Of the 3,000 users, how many are high school students, how many are in between, and how many are already in college?
Mr. Chair, Regent Shi, could we back up the slides a little bit? I think we'll
get the answer.
Yeah. I mean, we can give you the actual, or a close proximity of the numbers.
From this one.
So a little heavier usage at the higher ed level right now. So half of those 3,000 or more, a little more than half, are higher ed enrollments. A little more than a third are middle and high schools, and then the rest are, I'm not quite certain on the individual users. I don't know if we have actually that broken down, but the adult basic ed learning centers are a range of age people.
Are the courses available in Ed Ready similar to the ones that you would get as a high school student in the Montana Digital Academy?
Actually, they're similar in the sense that there's content there that is similar to, say, our algebra class that we use at Montana Digital Academy. But Ed Ready really isn't a course per se. It's more of an assessment, and then it offers up an individualized learning path using that content so that the student can strengthen those areas of need that have been identified in that initial assessment.
I just want to comment that I think the Digital Academy is doing really wonderful work. It's one of those good ideas that really is working. And I can see that Ed Ready is going to be the same thing. We have a whole class of kids I know in coming out of our high schools who start off in honors math, and by the time they're seniors, the only thing left to take is AP Calculus, and they may not be an AP Calculus kid. So you got them coming out, they decide not to take math, they don't need that 4th year, and they go into college having been good math students but without a year of math before they take that placement exam. And that's a kid who really needs this Ed Ready. And I have a son like that, and he may have actually used Ed Ready. He either did this or Khan Academy. Is Khan Academy a...
Actually, there is a portion of Ed Ready that uses Khan Academy, customized Khan Academy content. So if he was doing worked examples of problems from Khan Academy, it might have been in Ed Ready.
I think he was probably one of your 2%. So he did that before taking that placement exam. He was familiar with the program from Montana Digital Academy, and it's just been a really successful thing for a certain group of kids. And I really commend you on the progress you're making and how quick you're rolling this out, because there's no need for a lot of these kids to be doing remediation once they get into our colleges, and it's such a hindrance to persistence and graduation. So congratulations, I'm all for this. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Regent Williams.
This kind of tails onto Regent Sheehy's comment, but I have a thought when I think about students who are already in, maybe are already in our four-year baccalaureate programs who take time off of their education. They may have already completed their beginning math courses in higher education, and then they take time for financial, family, personal reasons, and then come back and are coming into upper division courses. Say if they're taking courses in engineering, but they took calculus 2.5 years ago. Is there an ability for students in scenarios like that to be able to log into Ed Ready, say, you know, I might need to refresh my skills before I go back and start this semester of school? How would a student in a situation like that utilize the program, or is that a possibility?
Mr. Chair, excuse me, Regent Williams, the answer is yes. A student could use that. Once they've established an Ed Ready account, and it could be through an affiliation or as an individual user, they're able to keep that account active and use it as they see fit. So it would be very, very possible, and we see that as a real opportunity and use case, whether it's the high school student who has skipped the year or someone who's returning. We've had students so far that have been out of mathematics for 25 to 30 years that have commented to us that this really helped them because they were extremely anxious about trying to walk into a traditional math class and get going again after all that time. You're welcome.
Commissioner Christian.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we certainly need to extend a few thank yous on this effort, this incredible partnership and a good effort to the folks at Montana Digital Academy under Mr. Curry's leadership. We truly thank you, but that's made possible by our friends at OPI and through the cooperation of Superintendent Juneau and others to make that partnership work. And so we greatly appreciate all that's going on to make this a success, and certainly need to say it one more time. We've done this along the way, but have to extend some thanks to the Washington Foundation for funding this effort. I think it's an incredible opportunity to help a lot of students in Montana, and it clearly wouldn't have been possible without help from the Washington Foundation. And yes, that is the Washington's money, and they're very involved with this project in particular, but I'd also like to say likely none of that happens without Mike Halligan and Larry Simpkins making it happen. So I'd like to thank those guys too for their support of this. This is good stuff for Montana. It's bridging through OPI, higher ed. It's getting to the heart of where I think most of what we need to accomplish to really see us meet these goals of retention and completion, and it's doing great things. So thank you all for your work on this.
And to the University of Montana too for being the landing spot for that. Yes, sir. Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Chair Krause. I would like to ask a couple questions. One, if we could go back to your map display on here, the next one. What's the legends on this as far as what is the square, red square and the dot mean, or is this just showing where these are all at? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Regent Robinson, what
it's kind of a color code for us as we were as we've been recruiting these ambassadors. The blue dots are where there would be a tribal college located, and the red ones are a part of the university system. And then there also may be an adult basic learning education center in some of those locations as well. So what we're attempting to do then is to cover all, or provide opportunities to all public, private, tribal colleges and universities in the state.
So then there's a plan to increase the learning centers that we're seeing here, or these are all of the learning centers that will exist?
Well, I believe there's 16 adult basic learning education centers, with some of them having smaller satellites under those programs. We've been working with Margaret Bowles from OPI, who oversees that, to offer that. So I don't know, to answer your question, I don't know about any plan to increase that, other than we are offering it to any of them who would like to use it.
I see. Okay, I understand. But all of these now have access to Ed Ready, is what we're saying?
Yes, they do. They do have access. I think this is you've kind of opened the door on why we have the ambassador program, because some of them have not taken advantage of it, maybe haven't really heard of it or aren't that familiar. We followed up, Dr. Seck did an introduction of me to all of the tribal presidents after his tour, and we've been following up with them, and some of them have already connected us with their mathematics staff and started to establish accounts, for example. But yes, any of these we would welcome the opportunity to work with.
Right, that's great. And the ambassadors will really be the link to meet with them, to show them the platform, to help them understand it. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
When do you anticipate having those ambassador positions filled?
Well, we have 2 of the 4 with commitments right now. And so actually, Ryan is going to be meeting with all of our ambassadors at 1 o'clock today using our GoToMeeting tool, remote tool. And so they're moving. So we have half of the higher ed. There's a couple regions we're still recruiting in, and we have a couple more interview calls on those. So we would hope, to summarize quickly, that we would get all of our ambassadors in place prior to winter break, so that they are able to hit the ground running when schools return in January. But some of them, we're getting them out already and getting them to various meetings, various contacts. Our ability to work with the Office of Public Instruction Liaison Program has really enhanced the speed, because some of those liaisons are also working for us as an ambassador. So they're calling on schools as a OPI liaison, but also providing information about Ed Ready. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Questions or comments? Thank you so much for this work.
You're welcome.
The last item we have, an action item, presentation of the Montana healthcare budget. This is an outgrowth of the budget, and is there any objection to moving this forward? Any objection to moving this forward? This is a conversation that we started in A, and now we're just carrying that forward. So if I hear no objection, we'll bring that forward, and I will close this meeting and turn it back over to Chairman Tuss. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Chair Kraus. We'll now move into the portion of the agenda associated with action, and let us begin at the top of our schedule with our Staff and Comp Committee. I would remind everybody that we've got 2 items here. We've got a fairly lengthy consent agenda, and we segregated out item B, which is the Missoula staff item. Let's do 2 separate.
Chair Tuss, I move approval of A and C through P.
You've heard the motion by Regent Kraus. Is there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or from the public? Is there any additional comment? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We now have before you action item B, Missoula staff item 165-1000-1114.
I'd move approval.
You've heard the motion. Is there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or from the public? Is there any additional comments? Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you. We'll now move on to ARSA. And we will begin with the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move items A and B under the consent agenda for ARSA forward for a vote.
Thank you, Regent Robinson. You've heard the motion. Is there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or from the public? Any additional comments? Madam President.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, as you have already discussed and seen the packet, Montana State University is really honored to advance the candidacy of Ambassador Brooke Anderson as a recipient for an honorary doctorate from Montana State University. She has a stellar track record. She has served the nation in such incredible positions as an ambassador, as advisor to two U.S. presidents. And now we're fortunate to have her in Bozeman, and immediately she has become part of our community, part of the high school system, but also part of Montana State University, where she has been teaching with distinction. So it is truly an honor for me to ask you to consider this nomination.
Thank you, President Cruzado. Additional comments? Additional comments? Additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We'll move on to the action items. We dealt with item A yesterday as a committee of the whole. So we have item B before you, which is mission review of Montana Tech. Is there a motion?
So moved.
You've heard the motion. Is there any comments by the board, by campuses, or the public? Any comments? Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Item C, mission statement revision for Montana Tech. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. You've heard the motion. Is there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or from the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Item D, mission review Western. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Item E, mission statement revision, Western. Is there a motion? It's been moved. Is there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Item E, mission statement revision, Western. Is that where we are?
F.
Item E. Is there a motion on that one? It's been moved. Is there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Item F, approval of core themes from Western.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Item G, mission review of MSU billings. Mission review of MSU billings.
Move approval.
It's been moved by Regent Kraus. Is there any additional comments by the board, by the campuses, or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Item number H, mission review, MSU Northern. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there any additional comments by the board, by campuses, or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Action item I, policy 940.20 revision OCHI. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Robinson. Is there any additional comments by this board, by the campuses, or by the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you. Let us now move on to the Budget Committee. And we do have 3 items on the consent agenda. What is your favor?
Move approval of consent items A, B, and C.
Thank you, Regent Kraus. You've heard the motion. Are there any additional comments from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We'll move on to action item A, authorization to execute lease for WWAMI program, MSU Bozeman. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. You've heard the motion. Is there any additional comments from the board, from campuses, or the public? Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Action item B, authorization for construction of the Washington Grizzly Champion Center, Missoula. Is there a motion?
Move approval with thanks to Kevin and Kyle Washington for their gift on behalf of the Washington Foundation included in this.
Thank you, Regent Albrecht. You've heard the motion by Regent Albrecht. Are there any additional comments by this board, by the campuses, or by the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. Action item C, authorization to build out of shelved space in the Interdisciplinary Sciences Building, Missoula. Is there a motion?
moved.
You've heard the motion. Is there any additional comments by the board, by the campuses, or by the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Action item D, authorization to proceed with insurance of Series and 2015 refunding revenue bonds, Missoula. Is there a motion to proceed?
So moved.
It's been moved. Thank you, Regent Robinson. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Excuse me, is there any additional comments? Are there any additional comments?
Chair Tuss, I'd just like to reaffirm that I am excluding myself from participating or voting on this item. Thank you.
Are there any additional comments by members of the board, by the campuses, or the public? Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Are there any abstentions?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion does pass with 1 abstention. Action item D, authorization to proceed with issuance of Series and 2015 refunding revenue bonds.
We just did that.
We just did that. I'm sorry. We're done with that. Thank you.
Abstain again.
We'll now move on to the 2-year and Community College Committee. And we do have 1 action item there, action item A, which is what we just discussed, presentation of Montana healthcare budget, request for expansion of spending authority of campuses for MOCHI. Is there a motion?
I move approval of the expansion of spending authority for campuses for the Montana healthcare budget.
Thank you, Regent Krause. Is there any additional comments by this board, by the campuses, or by the public? Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Before we end today, I would like to open the floor to public comment for those items perhaps that are not on our agenda. I see at least one person getting up to come to the podium. Dr. Shively, thank you for being with us today. Anybody else who is here to comment publicly before the Board of Regents, please feel free to approach the podium. Dr. Shively.
Chairman Tuss, members of the board, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address you one more time. We heard a couple of numbers today that I wanted to just make sure I had understood correctly. So Regent Robinson, I think, was correcting some statements yesterday about the faculty share of the unrestricted budget. Was I correct in understanding it that way? And I did download the budget, and I have a page that I could circulate here if that would be beneficial or helpful. I did make 9 copies for the Regents. Sorry, Royce. You can look at it. Correct, great. I did circle, I think, the numbers that were in question, and I just wanted to confirm that it's understood by everybody, and this is for the fiscal year 2015 budget. Contract faculty represent 30% of that budget with respect to compensation. Okay, the 76% figure, I think, that was advanced is total personnel services. And I think Commissioner Christian actually referenced that too. But since there were numbers going different directions, I just wanted to establish for the record what this is. So for faculty in 2015 fiscal year, that would be 30% just compensation. There would be the majority of the benefits listed down below as well. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Additional public comment. Is there additional public comment at this time? Once more, is there any additional public comment to come before the Board of Regents? If not, I know we've got at least one very brief presentation to make, and we also have a couple of announcements. And so for the presentation, I would like to turn the floor over, that would be great, to Regent Sheehy. She has a couple of presentations, I believe. Regent Sheehy?
It is my great regret that I am unable to attend the Cat Grizz game. And I wanted to give our presidents a little something for welcoming us not only to the board, but to the games and all of the other activities on their university. But in order to present my gift, I have to make a confession first, which is to my alma mater, I have been cheating on you. I have become a regular at the Cats games. So regular that one of these gifts was created entirely at Cats games. So I would like to present gifts for both presidents. Thank you for all of your welcoming. I wish I could be there with you at the game. And I hope this keeps you warm, whatever the outcome. And I think you'll recognize yours. Now,
Awesome.
yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, that turned out.
Thank you very much.
I don't know why, but the Grizz colors were only available in cashmere. And I don't know what that says, but you're going to get a little on you.
Regent Sheehy, does everybody realize she made those herself?
Yes, that's amazing. Which one did you make at the Cat game?
You know, I was told at my first Cat game that I could only knit in those colors. And so I started knitting in those colors. Yeah, I want a photo.
Yeah, let's have a photo.
Who's got a camera?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There you
Okay. Here, let's stand.
Thank you, Regent Sheehy. I'm slightly surprised we don't have students here to sing fight songs or something like that, as we've had at other meetings like this, but I certainly would turn over the microphone to President Engstrom. Once again, President Engstrom, thank you for hosting us the last 2 days. This has been an outstanding meeting. I know there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, but the fun only continues in the next day and a half, right?
Yes, thank you, Chair Tuss. It's that work behind the scenes that I want to take a moment to recognize, if I could, please. But let me begin by telling you, Chair Tuss, how I admire your ability to bring these meetings in on time each time. It looks like, you know, when we're going through there, how are we ever going to get done on time? But somehow you make it happen. So I may have you come in and run my cabinet meetings for me because they usually don't end on time. So. But there are so many people involved in putting a meeting on, and I know you appreciate the hard work behind the scenes. But I would like to thank folks from the University Center, folks from catering, folks from IT, from UM Athletics, the Provost's office, Integrated Communications, and particularly the Spectrum folks who put on the event last night for us. In my office, Rebecca Power and Penny Newbold, and from the office of the Commissioner, Amy and Liz, these folks have put in so many hours getting ready for all of this. So I just want to say thanks to everybody and would ask you to join me in thanking that whole group of folks. I want to remind you that there are box lunches available somewhere back here for you that you can pick up on your way out. And there's the tour at 1:15 for those who are interested, and so that will gather right outside of the UC down here. And so with that, thank you all for coming to Missoula. Let's go play some football.
The meeting is adjourned.